Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parent Stories. Today we have a very special episode for you, a compilation of some of the greatest entitled parent stories we read over the past year. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a few hours of the most entitled parents you've ever heard of. And by the way, Karen assured me that if this video gets 1,000 likes, she won't try to speak to anyone's manager for an entire week. So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. And become an official member of the Re-Army today, and I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming video. r/Entitled Parents. Entitled Aunt claims adult child has to obey her because it's the law. Another post about a parent volunteering their adult child reminded me of this. It happened to my cousin, but I was there for the majority of the story. I remember it so clearly for a couple of reasons, in addition to just having a good memory. It was the first trip after my father had passed, and it was, sadly, the last trip I took with my mother. She passed less than a year later. My aunt was always playing the big shot of solving people's problems, but using my cousin as the actual person to take on the problem, always for free. If someone insisted on paying, Entitled Aunt kept the money. Need a babysitter? A ride? House cleaned? Yard mowed? Errands run? Oh, my daughter can do it. As far as my aunt was concerned, the only reason Emily existed was to cater to her. Emily was her ultimate trophy. Entitled Aunt was entitled long before it became a huge thing. Cast. We've got Entitled Aunt. We've got Emily, my cousin. We've got Mike, Emily's boyfriend. We've got me. We've got police officers 1 and 2, and the judge. My aunt has always been entitled. It's her personality type. My mother couldn't stand her little sister, so we tried to avoid her, while still maintaining contact with her husband and child. My uncle, their brother, lived further south in the state, so we always tried to avoid Entitled Aunt knowing when we were visiting. On this trip, I was staying with my cousin for a couple of weeks in the summer, and we were going to do the tourist things. Entitled Aunt thought that the university, not being in session, meant that cousin was slave labor. One day, Emily decided that enough was enough. She was supposed to run errands for a friend of Entitled Aunt and had told her mother she had plans. Her mother, as usual, acted as though Emily had agreed and expected her to comply. Emily just didn't run the errand for the friend as demanded. It was that simple. My mother and I had arrived about 10 minutes before the phone rang. Entitled Aunt called, and though this was back during landlines, she was screaming so loudly that both my mother and I could hear both sides clearly. Entitled Aunt. How dare you embarrass me with my friends? You called Mrs. No Name and apologize immediately. You are grounded for a month, and you may not drive the car at all. Now, you make that call and go run those errands. Now! If anyone can explain how she was supposed to do this without using the car, I'd like to know. Emily. Mom, I'm 22. I do not live in your house. You do not pay my bills, and you do not own my car. Run the errands yourself. I have plans. My mom was a little nervous leaving us at that point. It's a mom thing, and a she has met her sister thing, even though we were both fine. She left just after meeting Emily's boyfriend. We left and went to a water park and a few other things. We got back to the house and were talking about where to have dinner. Mom insisted on paying for us to go someplace really nice for dinner that night. We get back and Emily's car is gone. She called and asked where it was. Emily. Mom, do you have my car? Entitled Aunt. Yes, I do. Your father brought me over so I could check and see if you had obeyed me. I told you that you were grounded, and you were not there when I arrived. I'm keeping the car for a month, but I'm going to let Mrs. No Name borrow it because you have been so horrible to her. Emily. Mom, that's stealing. I want my car back now, or I'm going to report it stolen. No, Mrs. No Name can't drive my car. I'm your mother. What I say goes, Missy. You need to learn some respect and to get it through your head that I'm in charge and you are the child. You don't own anything. It's mine because I am your mother. The police will likely arrest you for wasting their time. Emily hangs up and looks at me. She is so angry she is crying in rage. Emily. Hey sir, if I call the police, she's going to know you are here. Me. I can live with that. That fallout is a whole nother story. She picks up the phone and calls the police, tells them the car has been taken without her permission and where it is. Mike drives us over there. We do not want to miss the show. Officer 1 knocks on the door, and Entitled Ant answers. Hello, officers. Do you need something? Officer 1. Ma'am, the vehicle in the drive matches the description and location of a vehicle reported stolen. It's my car. I took it from my daughter because she is grounded from using it for being disobedient and disrespectful. Officer 2. I see. May we have a word with her, please? Entitled Ant, looking very smug. She doesn't live here. Officer 1, who had noticed us across the street. You 3, come over here, please. Did one of you call us? Emily. I did. It's my car, officer. My mother seems to think that she has control over it and me. Entitled Ant. It's my car. I'm your mother, and you have to obey me. It's the law. Tell her, officers. Officer 2. Actually, ma'am, there is no such law. Your daughter is an adult. There most certainly is such a law. I'm going to report you to your chief for not knowing it. I may even sue. Officer 1 to cousin. May I see the car registration and your license, please? Emily hands them to him. Ma'am, this car is registered in the name of your daughter and only your daughter. It's her car, and you have no right to drive it. Entitled Ant looks at the registration the officer is showing her and then snatches Emily's license from him and slams the door. The police officers look at each other for a moment and then shrug and ring the bell again. Entitled Ant answers it, looking very smug. Officer 1. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return the license now. Entitled Ant hands him the license that she has cut into several pieces. Now she can't drive because she doesn't have a license. She looks at Emily as though she just scored some odd victory. Then she finally notices me. Hey sir, what are you doing here? Me. Just trying to have a nice visit with my cousin. She has hated me for years. You need to leave. I didn't give you permission to visit. Where is your mother? I don't need your permission. My mother is not here. I can travel without her. Officer 1. Ma'am, you are under arrest for destruction of government property. Apparently, cutting up a valid license is a felony in some places. Who knew? And grand theft of this car. You can't arrest me. I'm her mother. I have rights. Officer 2. Yes, you do. He then reads them to her. The officer explains to us that until she destroyed the license, he had been willing to issue an appearance ticket. Then, instead of being arrested, she would just have had to appear in front of the judge and get a fine. This was a much bigger deal. Emily ran into the house to tell her father what had happened. We all chatted for a little bit until the phone rang. It was Entitled Ant telling him to call their attorney. We left. I drove the car back to Emily's and took her to get her license replaced the next morning. The attorney, called by my uncle, apparently didn't know my aunt, and he showed up at the first hearing, a week later, to try and get it dismissed. It looked to be going her way at first. Entitled Ant's attorney. Your Honor, this is a family matter. It's simply a case of a mother disciplining her child and the child calling the police because her mother grounded her from using the car. Judge. So, she got mad and called the police, and she, not knowing that it was a crime to destroy the license, did so? Attorney. Yes, Your Honor. That's pretty much it. Judge. Prosecutor, do you have nothing better to do today? Prosecutor. No, Your Honor, I don't. I consider it rather important. When a 22-year-old woman has her car stolen, it doesn't matter who stole it. She has just as much of a right to justice as someone who has their car stolen by a stranger. Judge. 22? The victim is 22? Prosecutor. Yes, Your Honor. The victim is a 22-year-old woman who is the sole owner of the vehicle in question. Her mother became enraged at her daughter. She then went to her daughter's home, stole her car, and later destroyed her license. Entitled Ant's attorney. Your Honor, I was not aware of the age or living situation of the victim. I was under the impression that the child was a minor who resides with her parents. Entitled Aunt was sitting there, still looking smug. Her attorney was sweating bullets. Judge: Entitled Aunt, do you realize that these are very serious charges, and if convicted, you face up to 8 years in prison?
For what? I have the right to discipline my child as I see fit. She disobeyed me. She will think twice before doing it again.
Judge: No, you don't. You have the right to discipline your child within the confines of the law. You have stepped outside of that parameter. You stole your daughter's car.
I'm her mother. It's my right. It isn't really theft because she is my child and her property belongs to me by law.
Judge: Where did you get your law degree?
I don't have one.
Then let me be the first to explain to you that your child is a legal adult. Period. You have no right to anything of hers without her express consent. Period. You may not take her car without her permission. Period. You may not enter her home without her permission. Period. Do you understand that?
You don't know what you are talking about. I'm her mother. That gives me the right. I'm in charge.
No, ma'am. I'm in charge. This case will be held over for trial. I went home a week later. Entitled Aunt eventually took a plea deal where she had 2 years probation and had to take parenting classes. The parenting classes were Mike's idea, and the prosecutor thought it was great. We laughed hysterically over that because my cousin is an only child. Emily and Mike married a year later and moved the heck away from there. This took place about 30 years ago. Entitled Aunt maintained for the rest of her life that the judges, there were 5 for different status hearings, didn't know what the heck they were doing and that she was right. Next we've got 2 bullies in my spin class mock me on social media. I get them banned from the studio and fired. On New Year's Day of 2018, I resolved to get in shape. I was never overweight, but growing up in Russia and spending my very early adulthood there, I smoked like a chimney, and my cardio was garbage. Going to college in America didn't help matters because I started drinking to go along with my smoking. I decided to start going to spin class. I work at a marketing firm and choose a particular spin class because I received a free, year-long membership as a holiday office party present that year. It was a generous gift because it was a trendy, pricey boutique spin studio. I've ridden bikes my whole life, so I thought, how hard can it be to ride a bike that doesn't go anywhere? But my first day in class was a rude awakening. It was clear that the class that I was attending, an early morning class for people to attend before work, was an advanced one where a majority seemed to already be part of the culture and very fit. It was obvious I couldn't keep up. The instructor was really nice and told me that since I'm new, it's a good idea for me to ride up front so that I can watch him and copy what he does more accurately. Or alternatively, he can easily see what I'm doing and offer alternatives if I'm not doing things right. I thought, what a great guy and what a great class. There were these 2 other students in the class though, who gradually made my morning spin classes suck. Valerie was obviously very fit. She looked like a model and obviously worked hard to look as good as she did. Boris was her male equivalent. They were both about my age, maybe a few years older, but it was clear that they were far more fit than me. They were obviously very interested in that particular gym's culture and that they were always checked out in the store brand athletic wear. I'm not going to lie, they looked good wearing it. They weren't a couple, but it was obvious that Boris had a thing for Valerie, and Valerie was aware of it and not reciprocating. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't my business. That thing about both of them being more fit than me, they never let me forget it. For some reason, they seemed to take offense to the fact that I was riding up front. I can see why. The front 2 rows were filled with the very strongest, fittest people, the let's take a selfie sort of gym people, except these ones seemed actually fit. At the same time, all the other super hot girls and guys, especially the guys, were very nice to me and didn't seem to care that I rode up front. Whereas Valerie and Boris would always shoot these sideward, disgusted glances at me, or smirk. I'm not a confrontational person, so I wouldn't do the thing most would do in that situation, such as say, "What the heck is your problem, jerk?" I always got to class super early to dress up and adjust my bike. the gym has a policy, first come, first serve, when it comes to choosing one of the 30 bikes in the studio. I noticed a lot of other people show up early who were also clearly less fit than the stars that occupied the first couple of rows, but they seemed to self-segregate into the very back. I was still new as it was my first couple of weeks, so I sat up front because I was still finding my rhythm. I'd sit right up front where the instructor told me so that I could watch him and he could watch me. Every time he would come in, he would greet me enthusiastically and praise me for my commitment to fitness. It was little wonder his class was so popular. Everyone held him in high regard. Sometimes in class, he would shout encouragements to the class as a whole, but also give personal shout-outs to certain students. Despite the darkness of the room, when the instructor said, "Great job there, OP! You're killing it!" I noticed both Boris and Valerie give each other a look and shake their heads, laughing. I never knew for sure why Valerie hated me, but I think it might be because we were both Russian, and no one else who went to that early class seemed to be, and she wanted to be the only East Euro girl. Who knows? As for Boris, he followed Valerie because he wanted to get with her. Boris and Valerie usually showed up right when class was starting and the whole place was packed, and yet they were so entitled that there were always 2 bikes up front, right next to each other, reserved for them. Despite the crowd, at 5:30 a.m., there were still a couple of empty bikes in the middle or back, but that wasn't good enough for them. I'd be right in the front row, too. I got there early, and it was my right to sit wherever I please. And yet, despite them showing up at the last second, they shake their heads at me like I'm the one who's got a lot of nerve. Well, this goes on day after day for a whole month, and despite the fact that I'm no longer new, and I'm starting to get more fit and don't really need the instructor so much just to survive the hour on the bike, I still sit right up front. I thought maybe the particular bike that I was selecting had some significance to Valerie or Boris, and that's why they copped such an attitude all the time. I always rode on the same bike. By this time, I was a bit chummy with a lot of the other women and knew their names, and we'd hug in the morning. I thought I should make peace with Valerie, if not Boris, who always sort of gave me a "I hate you because Valerie hates you, but if there was no Valerie, I'd totally go out with you" vibe. So when I saw Valerie that morning, as usual, she showed up right when the class started and sat next to me. I politely asked, "Was this your bike before and you were used to it? We can trade if you like." She rolls her eyes at me and gives Boris a look, and like a donkey, he smirks too. She actually says, "You should sit in the back. We're motivating people up here, and you're hogging the mirror space." There was a whole wall of mirror in front of the classroom. I'm thinking, what is this, high school? What the actual heck? You've got to be 30-something years old, and you're acting like this? And seriously, you may be fitter than me, but I'm just as tall, and don't weigh any more than you do, or take up any more space in the mirror, and it wouldn't matter even if I did. We're adults, or at least I am. That's what I wish I said. Instead, I just put my head down and went on with my class. Eventually, I got so familiar with the other students because the same regulars would come to class every day that we all became social media friends. I even became social media friends with the instructor. I don't post much on social media. I don't show where I work or every single thing I do or my random brain farts. I just post the occasional photo. On one of these rare photos, where I was admittedly begging for approval because I was proud of developing abs, the spin instructor himself commented how proud he was of me. A lot of people from spin class also said nice things. I was friends neither with Valerie nor Boris on social media, but they both liked the instructor's comment on my photo. And my guess is it's because they both liked to kiss his butt. They certainly never showed me any kindness in class, unlike everyone else who was supportive of me. I clicked on their names, and my suspicions were confirmed. Both of them practically lived on social media and took endless selfies, showed off their bodies, humble bragged nonstop. They also made no secret of who their employers were. Valerie tried to claim she was a model, even though it was clear her only real job was being a sales rep for a beauty brand. Valerie was only a model in the "take a picture of yourself using your iPhone in front of the bathroom mirror" sense. So, Valerie, I guess that makes me a model too. These two were such idiots that they'd post really dumb things on each other's walls. It didn't seem like they really had lives other than to talk trash against people. I saw that they had one exchange where they were clearly talking about me. How do I know? Because they actually said my name and said that I was ugly and a wannabe skinny fat and all this other horrible stuff. They also talked a lot about other people in the class and said horrible things and actually named names. It doesn't seem like they were very friendly with the other people, even the very fit people who in the same class were even fitter. In terms of the class, they were social media friends with the instructor and some of the other teachers on the schedule and with each other, but not with anyone else. Anyway, I actually confirmed my suspicion that Boris was low-key thirsty. After the spin instructor made a nice comment on my picture and Boris saw that I existed online, he sent me a private message asking me to go for coffee sometime. I ignored the message, which is just as well, because the next time in class he ignored me and just followed Valerie's normal smirk and psh routine. I don't like to start drama, but I don't like being bullied and trashed either. I screen captured and saved a lot of both Valerie's and Boris's comments where they trashed at least a dozen people in our class and then made a dummy Facebook account. I fired off every screen capture to the owner of the studio, not just the manager of that particular branch, but the owner of the whole company, in addition to the branch manager. I let them know that these two cretins were trashing many people in the morning class and creating a hostile, unwelcome environment. I was also nice enough to send the appropriate screen captures where Boris and Valerie named specific people in the class to those actual people, if their accounts weren't set to where only friends could message them or post on their feeds. In less than a week, Boris and Valerie were gone. Both had their memberships revoked and were banned from every one of the brand's studios. Several of the people that Valerie insulted were sufficiently offended that they sent emails to Valerie's employer. Valerie, as previously mentioned, made no secret of where she worked, about what a hateful, body-shaming person she was, and how such a person should not be any kind of brand ambassador. From what the other girls in the studio tell me, Valerie got fired from her job. Don't worry, Valerie, you still have your modeling career, or taking selfies next to your toilet in your apartment. I had the pleasure of seeing some of the less patient, ripped, buff dudes in class who didn't find it amusing that Boris was telling Valerie on Facebook that he could kick anyone's butt in class, openly offer to let him test his theory, anytime, anywhere. Unfortunately, Boris was too occupied up front getting his membership canceled and being refunded and being told to never come back, please, to make such arrangements. See ya, jerk. Boris had a wannabe, unlicensed personal training business that he talked about on Facebook, and several of the men in class who had legit training certificates shut him down with a quickness. There's always Starbucks. Maybe I'll go for coffee sometime and buy it from you. Borisista. As for me, I still show up early, but I usually find my comfort zone in row 2 now, or even further back. There's always new students, and I like for them to sit right up front so they feel welcome. That's what it means to be in a fitness community. Everyone's welcome. This isn't some kind of high school cafeteria. You can't sit with us, BS. I loved the class so much that I kept going into 2019 as a paying member, even after my free year was finished. In 18 months, I've posted 3 pictures related to the spin class. That 4-pack is coming in nicely. From certain lighting angles anyway. Goals. Haven't smoked in ages, still drink like a fish. It's the Russian in me, I think. I honestly hope Boris and Valerie grow up. I low-key hope they marry because they deserve each other. Though I also hope they don't breed, because that much narcissism from 2 parents would result in a kid with lots of issues. No, Karen, my house is not your hotel. My neighbors rent out their home while they're in Europe. It's been a pretty problem-free experience until today. Yesterday I was studying at home. At midday, I saw a car pull up in front of my neighbor's house. A couple exited and immediately went up to the front door to knock. As time passed and no one answered, they started exploring the property, presumably searching for someone. Unfortunately for them, no one was home. This is where things started to get interesting. The man, growing increasingly agitated, decided the sensible thing to do in this situation was to climb over a fence into my neighbor's backyard. As I watched, perplexed by his decision-making, I saw him wandering around, knocking on, and then trying to forcibly open the back door. It was a rather amusing sight. That is, until he gave up and decided the next thing he'd like to climb is the fence from my neighbor's backyard into mine. Oh no. At the moment, our landlord is building an extension to the house, and immediately I'm worried that this man might accidentally injure himself on the construction site. I rush out to speak to him. What I met with is an out-of-breath, red-faced man and a woman whose face looks like a smacked donkey, rapidly descending down my driveway towards me. Knowing a little about my neighbor's arrangement, I initially try to help. Hi, are you guests at neighbor's Airbnb? Check-in isn't until 3 p.m. I don't think you'll find anyone there at the moment. The lady, now upon me, was unhappy after hearing this.
You need to let us into the house.
I'm taken aback. I'm sorry? I'm not your Airbnb host. I just live next door. You should get in touch with neighbor, as they'll be able to help. Ignoring the perfectly rational advice I've given them, the lady starts turning a deep shade of red, her partner silently glaring at me, his face beginning to contort with anger.
They told us we could check in at 10 a.m.
You should really contact your host. As I've said, I'm just the neighbor. This only seemed to anger the couple more, and the lady immediately started shouting at me.
You need to let us in, or I am calling the police.
Wow. At this point, I'm getting pretty annoyed. I tried to explain the situation to her again, but only got so far as, I can't let you in, before she cut me off.
Let us in, or give us our money back.
Now, in her increasing anger, coherent sentences started to break down, which in hindsight was pretty funny to watch. It became a series of,
You told us 10 a.m. Give me back my money.
And more threats to call the police who would apparently get them a refund. I've never seen anyone get so belligerently mad in such a short amount of time. At this stage, I'm done with being polite. Lady, I am not your Airbnb host. You, gesturing to the man, climbed over the fence into my backyard, which is why I'm out here speaking to you. You both need to leave and contact your host. I know that their check-in isn't until 3 p.m. Being forceful at least interrupted her tirade, but she was still mad. As I watched her, I could see her slowly starting to process the situation. Despite this, she wouldn't apologize or admit she was wrong. Instead, what she blurted out next was,
Can we at least store our luggage with you then?
What? She repeats herself, this time much louder, apparently still under the delusion that yelling is the way to get what she wants. Nope, you're not leaving anything with me. After a further brief exchange, they left, and I immediately let my neighbors know what happened. Now, here's the justice to the story. My neighbors were annoyed, really annoyed. They tried to contact their guests, but they wouldn't answer their phone. Eventually, they let Airbnb know what happened. Airbnb tried to reach out to them too. Again, the guests were uncontactable. During our exchange, the man let me know his name. Let's call him Bob the Jerk. As it turns out, the booking was made under a completely different name. Both my neighbors and Airbnb tried to verify who was staying, but Bob wasn't responding to their calls or messages. Eventually, Airbnb decided to cancel Bob's booking. I wrote a note letting Bob know he needed to check his Airbnb message and that his booking had been canceled due to the situation this morning. At 3 p.m., the car returned, this time filled with 4 more people. Apparently, Bob the Jerk was trying to sneak in a few extra unpaid guests. I watched the quiet resignation on their faces as they read the note. It felt good. As an aside, my neighbor managed to rebook the dates with a lovely Chilean couple, and Airbnb honored the payout for the insane couple's canceled booking. My neighbors insisted on giving me a portion of the payout for my trouble, but honestly, knowing that these horrible people were inconvenienced was enough. Next we've got, entitled parent lets sick kid loose on cruise, ruins everyone's vacation. 2 or 3 years ago, I went on a cruise with my mother and my friend with his mother. We grew up together as our families are really close, so we're practically like siblings. This was an 8-day cruise, departing from New York City, going around the Caribbean, and then going back up. The ship was one of the really nice/famous ones, with tons of restaurants, pools, water slides, etc. It had a capacity of over 2,000 guests. On the second day, our parents made friends with another group of families, and we decided to head out together that day once the boat pulled into port. We met at breakfast to plan the day. There were quite a few families there with kids, and of course, all the little ones were left to their own discretion at open buffets and were wild, kinda gross. Later on, I overheard one parent, entitled parent, complaining to someone about their kid. Apparently, kid wasn't feeling well and hadn't wanted to come, but entitled parent didn't want to leave him behind to laze around in their room, as they had spent so much money to go out and have fun. I didn't think of it as something too serious, so we carried on. Around halfway through the day, while hiking in the middle of nowhere on some small mountain, I started having serious stomach cramps. They got to the point where I would have to stop and breathe every 10 minutes or so. My mom and my friend decided to leave the rest of the group to help me back to where our tour bus was waiting, as I was clearly in no condition to continue hiking. It took us a while, since I was in so much pain, but eventually we got back on the bus where I could attempt to sleep and wear it off. We assumed I had gotten food poisoning or ate something bad. What I hadn't known and found out later was that the kid from earlier wasn't just not feeling well. He had a serious virus. Symptoms included severe vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, muscle aches, fever, and fatigue and lethargy. It can last days, which didn't seem long, but keep in mind that it was an 8-day cruise, and it was extremely contagious, especially in close quarters. Well, guess what? We just happened to be in a closed-off ship with thousands of people, with open buffets, just waiting to be contaminated. By the next day, the third, I wasn't the only one not feeling well. Everyone in our room had got it. My mom, my friend, his mom. There was a small line in front of the clinic by the time we got there, including a couple of the families who went on the hike with us. Literally everyone suffering from similar symptoms. The medical staff gave us some sort of Tylenol-esque medication and told us to stay in our room for the next while, so we didn't pass it on to anyone else. We listened to them. Entitled parent did not. Entitled parent continued to take their kid around the water slides, buffets, shows, despite everyone warning her not to. Her son was still very much sick, but she wanted him to have the best experience on his first ever cruise. On the fourth day, a word of mouth told me that it was quickly spreading. The cruise started offering free movies and in-room catering for those who were sick in a futile attempt to keep them in their rooms. Live shows were canceled because even the performers were getting sick. On the fifth day, the cruise announced that they could not dock the ship at the stop of the day. Local authorities had heard of the outbreak and forbade us from entering the port. Everyone was in a lot of pain. I could barely hold down water without throwing up. Felt dizzy if I did as much as stand up, and just in general felt like utter absolute crap. I had Tylenol and rest though, and by around the sixth day, both my friend and I were well on the mend. We dared to spend a few minutes outside. No openable windows in the room made us crave fresh air. The population outside was decimated. If you've never been on a cruise before, it's like a mall on Boxing Day. There are people everywhere, talking and laughing and eating and doing whatever you do on a cruise. But that day, the ship was almost empty, other than some employees wearing gloves and face masks and a few lucky stragglers. We probably saw around 100 to 200 people, in comparison to the 2,000 person capacity. In order to have a good time, entitled parent let her kid spread the virus to almost everybody on the ship. There is no vaccine for this virus, so literally nobody could have been safe. Not to mention, cruise ships always have many retired elderly with lower immunity levels. She didn't just ruin literally everyone's vacation, she put people at genuine risk as well. I don't think her son should have been allowed to board the ship in the first place if they had known he was sick, as I believe there are some regulations about bringing contagious diseases into the closed environment. Anyhow, moral of the story is, don't take your sick kids on vacation. If you have to, for some reason, At least leave them in the room and let them recuperate instead of passing it around. It's not only better for everyone else, it's better for them too. Also, avoid open cruise ship buffets if possible. Most have at least 1 or 2 free a la carte restaurant options for all 3 meals. Next we've got entitled stepmom gave away my PS4 while I was off at college, so I rent out her house while she's on honeymoon with new husband. I'm an only son. My mom passed of ovarian cancer at only 55 years of age. It broke my dad's heart. They had been together since college and were the same age, with my dad being a month older. I'm 22 and am about to graduate college with my degree in chemistry when the main events start to occur. I went to college on a full-ride scholarship. This is important later. My dad met my now stepmom when she was my mom's nurse at the hospital where she spent her final days. My stepmom, Grace, played all the right notes to gain my dad's trust. She was empathetic towards him, nurturing, comforting after my mom passed. I was 17 and old enough to sense that she was just trying to weasel her way into getting my dad's money, but it was up to my dad if he wanted to be in a relationship with her. I was in my final year of public school and had just won a scholarship to attend college out of the country the following year. My dad mourned my mom for a year, and that whole time, Grace would check in on him by phone every month or so, in my opinion, to scope out the possibility of sinking her hooks in him. After a year passed, Grace took the gloves off and went hard after my dad. Grace was only 40 when she and my dad started seeing each other. I didn't like her, but at the same time, my dad at least didn't seem so depressed anymore. So I tried to be less pessimistic about her and give her the benefit of the doubt. In my gut, I didn't trust her though. But we are Scandinavian, and at least in my family, the son does not tell the father what to do or even offer any opinion. Grace is from the Czech Republic, if you're wondering. My father was a very successful banker during his career, amassing quite a portfolio of wealth. I'll spare you the details, but after 6 months of dating, Grace and my father are married. My dad never really got over my mom though, and he was getting weaker and weaker, even though he was only 57. Since his health was fading, and he called me to him and asked me point blank, "Boy, what do you need to set you up in this life?" I told him I don't need anything. I'm a man and can take care of myself. But what are you even talking about, Dad? You're going to be around for decades yet. I did remind him that he had living sisters with children, my aunts and cousins. I also reminded him that I had a full scholarship to college, so don't worry about giving me any cash. He passed only a year later at 59. I, of course, have seen lots of Hollywood movies, so I consider the theory that maybe my dad's nurse wife was the cause of this and made him sign over all his money to her. But I really honestly do not think that's what happened. Other relatives didn't like Grace either, but they knew my dad was totally in love with my mom and that her death utterly broke him. Well, long story short, my dad bequeathed his 5-bedroom house to me even though I wasn't expecting it and didn't ask for it. He gave a small endowment to each of his sisters and their kids. He left about 80% of all his existing money to Grace, which amounted to several hundreds of thousands of dollars. My dad ignored me because he's generous to a fault and still gave me several tens of thousands of dollars, which were of course very useful to me. Grace tried to put on a friendly front, but I could tell she was angry as heck that she didn't get my dad's house too. That belonged to me, and I had the legal papers to prove it. She was especially mad because we live in an extremely upscale and trendy location, and houses are hard to come by and easily sold for massive profit. During the first few months after my dad's passing, I had the nauseated, creepy experience of knowing that Grace was trying to feel me out to see if I might be into a little relationship with her. Gross. She still stayed at the house though, because over the last 3 years she had gotten used to living there and acting like she owned it. And even though I officially owned it, I was always away at college and only visited my dad's old house once every couple of months. And even then, it wasn't to see Grace, but to see my cousins who lived just a few miles away. I downplayed the fact that it was really my house, and over the months, I think Grace gradually forgot that she really had no legal right to the house. She probably believed that sooner or later, because I never asked her for any of the hundreds of thousands of my dad's dollars that she now had, that I was somehow independently wealthy and would just give up my house to her. I knew I'd eventually get revenge on her when she started dating some new guy only 5 months after my dad was gone. And one time when I came home from college after graduating, she and her new boyfriend, some sleazy-looking jerk named Ivan, who was only a few years older than me, were acting like I was a guest in my own house and that they owned it. I played along. Grace told me she gave away my PlayStation 4 to Ivan's cousin because I'm too old to play video games. I don't even know this jerk, and you give him my PS4 to give away to some other guy who I also don't know? I quickly changed all my network passwords that same day. I smiled, but I knew what I had to do eventually. She also said that she and Ivan were getting married because
I just can't mourn your father forever. I have to move on with life.
I tell her that I graduated college and already secured employment with a local firm and will soon find a new place to live. She looked thrilled, especially the part where it looks like I'll soon have a new place to live. Then, in a patronizing way, she tells me,
You always have a place in our house, though. You are welcome to stay whenever you please.
Thanks, Grace. Really generous of you. What I really say is that I will probably have a new place in 3 months. She says that is wonderful because she intends to go to her homeland to have a wedding with Ivan and afterwards have her honeymoon. She assures me it's a local affair.
Otherwise, I'd invite you, honey. And anyway, I know you're so busy.
I congratulate her. She asks me if I can watch the house for her. Watch my own house? Sure. What I really say is, of course I will take care of the house. I am careful to not say your house. She and her jerk fiance, who I am 100% sure is only there for Grace's money, go on their trip, and I immediately put out advertisements in rental websites offering to lease my house. I hire movers and have all of Grace's furniture and possessions boxed up and put into a storage rental facility. I retain all of my parents' furniture that they had before my dad met Grace. Locks? Changed. All of them. Within days, I am inundated with dozens of inquiries regarding my amazing furnished house with fantastic views. I rent it to a wonderful young family. They pay me their first and last month's rent and sign a lease for a year. I warn them about my crazy stepmom who thinks this is her house, but I present them with contact information to my lawyer, the same lawyer my dad retained, in case they need any assurance that I'm on the level. I also give my lawyer the information about the storage facility, including the fact that I generously paid 4 months of storage in advance, which is a whole month longer than Grace's Czech honeymoon adventure. I then found a great apartment in the city near my new place of work. There I met a woman in a restaurant I frequent at night after a long workday. We've been dating 6 months now and are engaged to be married. Grace, of course, tried to shriek and cause trouble when she realized she got kicked out of my house, but my lawyer quickly shut her mouth without my having to ever speak to her garbage face again. From what I hear, her and her jerk husband left the country, and I assume they're blowing through my dad's money and will soon be broke like people usually become when they taste a little bit of what they think is the good life. So maybe Grace will go and try to trick some other lonely person into giving her his money. Speaking of money, the house that I rent out is generating so much money that I not only am able to help pay for my cousin's college, but I moved into a larger apartment of my own, together with my fiance. I love my job, but really, I could survive solely on renting my dad's old house. And to think, if Grace had only been cooler and nicer, I might have let her stay at the house just to be a good sport, and definitely if she stayed the heck out of my room. But no, she had to act all proprietary, so I had to make her homeless as a wedding gift. I bought another PS4, even though I didn't even use my old one that much. It didn't matter. It wasn't for Grace to give away. You don't give away other people's things. You give away your own things. Which is why I chose to kick Grace out of my house, because it's mine, and I decide who stays there. Entitled Grandmother tells me to quit my job and find a new line of work. I'm male, 17, but look a lot older. I've been working at the movie theater in my hometown for almost 2 years now. It is in a nicer part of town. We get a lot of stuck-up, entitled families. Story. This past summer, I was working concessions on a Saturday. Not a very busy day. Our morning rush had just ended, and most of the movies had already started outside of this one kids movie. I'm alone at the concession stand with about 3 small families all about to see this kids movie. Cue our entitled parent. Entitled grandparent in this case. She looks like she's in her 60s, very skinny with short white hair, and clearly holds herself to high standards judging by the amount of makeup and the expensive looking outfit she was wearing. She's standing in line behind a mom, which I am in the process of helping. She is almost done with her transaction, which totals out to be almost $100. I ask if she is a rewards member, and she says she didn't know we had one. The inner salesman in me decides to try to sell her a membership, which doesn't take long, pitch and all, hoping I can save her a few bucks. Though, before I can start, entitled parent.
Can you please hurry up? I'm missing my movie for this, and you're taking forever.
Me. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll be done with you as soon as I can.
Well, you better hurry. I told my grandson I'd get him a drink, and you are taking way too long.
Me. I understand. I promise. I'll be with you shortly. I look back down at the lady I was helping, quietly apologize, and give her a quick sales pitch before finalizing the transaction. She tells me that she wants to sign up for the rewards program and to start filling it out for her. This all takes about a minute total. After I go get all the things she ordered, which was a lot, I call up the entitled parent.
OMG, finally! Could you take any longer?
I'm so sorry about the wait, ma'am. What can I get for you?
No, you're not sorry. After I told you to hurry up, you decided to go on some big, unnecessary sales pitch. If you ever wanted to know the best way to lose customers, you found it.
Me. I didn't realize.
I don't even know why you work here. You are so bad at your job. I'd highly recommend you find another place to work because this clearly doesn't suit you very well. I don't know how long you've worked here, but you should just quit your job and find a new line of work better suited for someone as lazy as you.
At this point, I look at her very confused and internally holding back any laughter that wants to come out. Because not only have I been working here longer than almost every other person at that location, but I'm a minor working a part-time job, so I can save up for college. Entitled parent then proceeds to hold up some fancy-looking ring and starts to shove it in my face.
You see this? Yeah, that's real. And that's what hard work gets you. Guess you'll never see anything like it in your life, because you clearly don't even know what hard work is. You know what? Don't worry, I'll talk to your manager and get you fired. That way, you won't be inconveniencing anybody else in the building like you did to me today.
Me. So, what can I get for you?
I would like a bottle of apple juice. And don't even bother with that rewards crap. I don't want to hear you trying to sell me anything else.
I go grab the bottle of apple juice for her, specifically walking extra slow. Me. Okay, that'll be $5.18. Oh, and do you have a rewards membership with us?
No! I told you, I don't want to buy that stupid rewards thing. Here is my card. Just swipe it and let me go back to my movie.
Me. Would you like your receipt? Entitled parent didn't answer me. She then dramatically grabbed the $5 bottle of apple juice and stormed off into her theater. Afterward, I had not only the entire line that was waiting to order, but the lady that already ordered come up to me and apologize for entitled parent's rude behavior. Entitled parent did go talk to my manager after her movie was over, but not before I told him what happened. He told her to leave, and that if he ever saw her again, he'd be calling the police to have her escorted off the premises. I haven't seen her since. Next we've got,
how dare you work retail? No daughter of mine will work at such a place.
This wasn't me, but my friend/roommate. This just happened the other day, and she's still upset about it. Said I could share. Context. She's a pre-law student, aiming to get a degree in business law. Her parents are pretty successful people, living in a nice house, in a nice neighborhood, etc. Her dad is a straight-up helicopter dad, aka controlling. He controls her bank account and calls her to yell at her whenever she buys pretty much anything. Why did you spend $8 at Starbucks? Why did you get Subway twice this week? Why did you spend $50 at a Target? Additionally, since he pays her rent, she pays her own utilities, which will be important later. He believes he can set all the rules for both of us. I told him straight up he doesn't get to dictate my life in any way, and he can just buzz right off with that. My friend said that I apparently impressed him because he's not used to people standing up to him, but he still doesn't like me. One rule is, no guys are allowed in the apartment, ever. He seems to think that if there are guys in the apartment, his daughter can't help but get into trouble with them. Good things my cats are girls, I guess. No standards, nothing. Although he has lightened up a bit after freaking out that my friend has a boyfriend and that he has stayed over before. He also demanded she come home every weekend, a 2-hour drive without traffic, because he doesn't want her to party. Luckily, she and her level-headed mother have gotten him to lower it to once a month. As a result, she keeps a lot of stuff from him, which makes him more angry and less trusting of her. So he tightens the leash, and it just goes around and around. For example, he doesn't know that 2 boys subleased from our previous roommates for the summer. They were in the dorms, but taking summer classes, so they needed a place to stay for the summer. They were my old roommate's brother and his friend. He also doesn't know that her boyfriend has been living with us since May, since he graduated, and is staying with us until he finds work. He just got his CPA. She also didn't tell her dad that she took a part-time job over the summer. Now the last 2 bits are important. See, because her boyfriend has been staying with us, he's also been paying utilities. I think he should also pay rent, or at least half of her rent, but whatever. She also wanted to have some fun money to go out over the summer. She was taking summer classes, but had a light workload. She got a job at the liquor store a block from us and worked there all summer and left after the fall semester started. So, because her father can see her bank account, and he'd apparently lose his crap if he found out his daughter dared to work and try to be a responsible adult, she never told him and never deposited her checks. She cashed them out. Additionally, because her boyfriend is also paying utilities, we've been splitting it 3 ways instead of half, which was showing in her bank account since she has to pay the full bill because it's in her name. Fast forward to yesterday. My friend ended up depositing some of her cash from her job this summer in order to pay for last month's utilities because her boyfriend forgot to pay her. He PayPals her the money so her dad can't see it. And the check I gave her bounced because at the time I didn't have any money in my account. I had told her to wait until I got paid, but she deposited it the day before I would. The bounced check and the sudden $100 deposit in the account caught the attention of her dad. What resulted was an hour-long screaming match on the phone. She told me later some of the things he said. He called her a liar and demanded that she report me to the police for fraud. Dude, it's just a bounced check. It's all good now. He dug into her because she admitted the $100 came from her job this summer because he was accusing her of committing crimes. That's where he lost his crap. Apparently, dear old dad was livid that his daughter would dare to work at such a lowly place. His words. Specifically, he was mad that she didn't tell him she had a job and that she should have been focusing on schoolwork, but he was most upset about where she was working. It wasn't so much that it was a liquor store, but that it was retail. "Why the heck would you work retail?" he screamed. "Because it's just a block away, and it was easy work, Dad," my roommate screamed back. "How dare you? You shouldn't have been working. You needed to focus on school." "I didn't have much schoolwork, Dad, so I got a job to have some extra money." "How dare you work at such a lowly place? We didn't work this hard to have our daughter work retail. You should be above that. If you wanted a job, you should have gotten that office job Marie told you about." She told me later that her dad has a real issue with retail workers. He seems to think that the only people who work at retail or as waitresses are failures and high school dropouts, so he doesn't want his daughter to work with them. "I just wanted something easy and within walking distance, Dad. I didn't want to drive 2 hours just for a summer job." "You shouldn't be working with lowlives. You should have talked to me first." "I didn't talk to you because I knew you'd do this." "This is why we can't trust you. You've always done crap like this." Then he proceeds to bring up her past screw-ups from middle school and high school. He doesn't seem to understand that she's changed quite a bit since then. She then digs into him over his BS. She then hangs up on him, telling him that she won't talk about the past with him and that she's more than happy to talk about her screw-ups when he can talk to her like an adult. So proud of her for saying that. She hasn't talked to him since yesterday. Her level-headed mom calling, saying she was sorry he yelled at her and that he's just upset because his mother's in failing health. And then he saw the bounce check, so he turned his stress towards her. I took her out to breakfast. My treat, since her dad would have lost his crap if he saw that she spent money at a diner, while she vented about her dad. I finally convinced her to get her own bank account where she can at least put her fun money and the cash she gets from her boyfriend for utilities. Luckily, he still doesn't know about him staying with her. We also decided to split the utilities by half so her dad doesn't lose his crap again and her boyfriend would pay us back the difference for his share. Since she was still hopping mad, we ended up using that energy to clean the apartment and bake bread, since she was too upset to focus on schoolwork. Her dad has approved of her getting some groceries today, so she said she'd buy me some to pay me back. And Monday, I'm going to help her set up her own account with the one bank this town has. I feel so bad since this all happened because my check bounced. I'ma buy her a cake or something to apologize. Edit. Update. This morning he called her to apologize, which is just another red flag to add to the pile in my opinion. Berate someone, then say you're sorry and that it's because XYZ. But as she keeps telling me, she's used to it. Can't wait to help her get that bank account. Next we've got, boss treated me like trash, so I showed him what I can do. We've got K-Run, my store. We've got Tyler, K-Run's half owner. And we've got R-Dragon, K-Run's direct competition. Backstory. I work at a local game store that sells nerd hobby stuff like Magic the Gathering and Warhammer. I had been a customer of K-Run for many years before an employee through luck and perseverance. An opening came through, and I was able to wiggle my way into the event planner role, in charge of planning and running all our nightly and large tournaments for various games. I work 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., 5 nights a week, as the only employee from 7 p.m. on with the customers. Over time, I became friends with all the regular customers that I'm not already friends with. The things to come. Skip forward a few months. The manager who usually moderates the stupidity of the owners goes on a much-deserved month-long vacation. So now Tyler steps up to the plate and is doing all the orders for the store. Tyler doesn't play any of these games, and frankly, I don't understand why he even owns a stake in the store. Tyler thinks he knows better than his staff, of which I am one of 3, who actually all play these games and know what products are popular and which are trash. He is constantly wasting money on products that don't sell. For example, he will buy 2 core games and 2 of each expansion, assuming that everyone who buys the base game will sink hundreds into all of the expansions. The reactants. The bad orders are frustrating, but tolerable. Then he starts messing with the event schedule. We had another local game store open in our area, R-Dragon, and up until this point, I personally had a soft arrangement with the owner of R-Dragon to not conflict on our events, so we can both be healthy. Well, now Tyler changes up our event schedule to conflict with R-Dragon and tries to increase price support. The result of that was regular customers getting confused and missing their regular events that had been the same time and day for years. Every night, I am personally apologizing for the mistakes of the owner and that I'm doing everything I can to help the customers. The catalyst. Where I live, if you work 6 hours, the government says you must have a 30-minute break in there. Up until now, my coworker would take their break when I get in at 4. Usually earlier when I come in early off the clock for them, and I would take my break at 6:30, right before they leave. Well, now Tyler has decided to cut costs and get rid of that overlap. But I'm still working 6-hour shifts, with nobody else around to watch the store while I'm on break. So I tell him about this issue, and he just shrugs it off like it's no big deal. Then he beats around the bush for a while until I ask him clearly, "Are you asking me to skip my break?" To which he says no, but gets very testy with me. Problem goes unresolved until I'm at work alone, and I tell him I'm going to take my break. and if that means I leave the store unattended for 30 minutes, that's my legal right. I wasn't going to. I just wanted to see how he would respond. So he ends up driving 30 minutes each way at dinner time to sit at the cash register for 30 minutes while I go get a pizza. He doesn't like that I've done this, so he drops 12 hours off of my schedule, which I can financially survive short term. But if this is how he responds to his own mistakes, then so be it. The betrayal. A few days later, nothing is resolved yet. I walk to our competitor, our Dragon, and ask the owner there for a full-time job as an event planner. No resume, just my name. That was enough. We talk for a bit, and I walk out with a job offer for more hours and a better work environment. Once I get an official letter of offer, I give my 2 weeks notice at K-Run. Tyler had a history of firing employees via text while he was on vacation. It just so happened that he was on vacation for a weekend, so I quit to him via text. I expected him to fire me on the spot, as he had done to other employees. Instead, he didn't, and that was almost more satisfying as him firing me because it acknowledges that I'm important to him at that point. While I'm at it, I ask for him to restore me to the hours I had before because at this point, I had nothing to lose here. He gives me back most of my hours. Tyler isn't liked in the community by anyone. He's directly driven away customers before by being aggressive towards them. The setup. I'm entrenched in the local gaming communities. I have unintentionally built the brand of the trustful employee who is looking out for the players as best he can while balancing business interests. I am well liked by most players. So, over the next 2 weeks of my time at K-Run, I stopped doing all the extra work I had been doing to help keep the store in order. I stopped managing the social media because that was just something I took the initiative on instead of it being my job description. Tyler ended up changing the times of events for no apparent reason, but that kept rubbing players the wrong way, and I'm there at night with them alone still, so I can slide all the blame towards Tyler and off myself. I spend my time doing the work that needs to be done and no more. I spend the rest of my time socializing with players as I always have, but now I have another motive. I make sure Tyler's personal reputation is nothing but ashes. I up the prize support for some games to build better relations with the players. I do everything I can except actual sabotage to the business. Tyler now starts his morning by reviewing all the security footage from the previous night to watch me for anything he can try to use against me. But I've done nothing. And he cannot record audio due to local laws. The first week of notice goes by mostly fine. Tyler really can't do anything to me because he has nothing, and I have nothing to lose. If he tries anything with me, I just leave early and start at our Dragon early. I had begun to spend a lot of time in the store. I would come in at open to paint miniatures and keep my presence in the store while the owners were there, listening to everything they say. At first, they just didn't say anything related to me, but they gave up and just talked about me and everything while I was there. I never gave them an opportunity to talk in the store without me being in the building. The contract. On Saturday night, the other owner sends me an employment contract to sign. Now's a good point to mention that I had been working without a written contract, which is fine where I live, because pay stubs are enough to prove employment. Verbal and handshake agreements are fine. Definitely not the normal, but fine. I take my time to read the contract and note all the problem areas of it. A few sections like non-competition clauses and non-solicitation clauses were in there, and I told him I would not sign these while these sections are in the contract. Either way, I've given my notice a week prior. It's completely stupid to give me this, and even dumber for me to sign it, so I don't. I send the contract to my partner's father, who happens to be a small business lawyer, and he gives it a look and just tells me not to sign it and get confirmation that my employers see that I reject their contract. The best part, I had asked for a contract when I started, and the owners dragged their feet about it. Now that I'm leaving to work at their competitor, they are terrified that there's no contract and no rules on what I can do. The last week. The owners take their sweet time getting the schedule up. I was in while they were working on it and finished it. This was a Monday morning, and I was supposed to be working that night, but I was told previously I wouldn't be working that night. When they were done, I asked to see the schedule so I can plan my week out. Tyler says he'll post it online in an hour, but it's right in front of him. He doesn't want me to see it while I'm there in person. Not good. A few hours later, he posts the schedule. I was supposed to work 3 more days that week. Instead, I was only scheduled on the last day they could, and outside of my normal hours too. So I just say forget that and tell the manager, who I love very much and appreciate dearly, that I wouldn't be there for that shift, and he would have my key the next day. He was supportive and understanding of the garbage I'd dealt with. The revenge. I start early at our Dragon. They gave me seamless employment so that it wouldn't hurt my finances, and it's very appreciated. Now I'm properly able to enact my revenge. I first had all my closest friends stop going to K-Run in favor of our Dragon. Then I got the largest community and highest paying community that I was also a large member of and a community organizer of outside of my job to move to our Dragon all at the same time. Immediately after I left, K-Run's largest communities up and left to move to our Dragon on support of me. I then moved the second largest community and the third largest community. Suddenly in a month, I have taken the majority of K-Run's customers and moved them to be customers of our Dragon. I came up with plans and schemes to help players move easier while also taking K-Run's best stock for ourselves. Aftermath. K-Run still exists, though it's only been a month. They had to shift their entire business model because I took their primary business with me. Our Dragon is thriving, and my new bosses are ecstatic with how well I've done for their store. I'm currently the only employee at our Dragon who specifically works there. We have a few people who come from other stores the owners own to cover times we aren't available. I've become an almost partner with the 2 owners of our Dragon, deciding which way each of them uses is best for each scenario. I am setting up our Dragon to be a powerhouse in the community and to take on more employees down the road. Next we've got the traffic tickets became the least of his problems. A few years back, my old car was on its last legs. My mechanic said it wouldn't last much longer, and the best thing to do was sell it cheap and move on before it gave out and was ready to be scrapped. I loved that little car, but I put it up on Craigslist for $500 and got a bite. The guy buying it was in his 20s with a pregnant wife, and his dad was footing the bill. I was clear with him that it was sold as is, and I couldn't make any promises about its longevity. The buyer said that if it lasted 6 months, he'd be happy with the purchase, so he signed the bill of sale, and I handed over the title. I immediately went to the DMV website and registered it as a sale, and assumed he would finish the process by transferring the title. Turns out I was wrong about 2 things. The car lasted much longer than 6 months, and he didn't bother to pay the $77 to transfer the title. I discovered this when I received a photo radar ticket for running a red light. I was confused because the street was way across town in an area I rarely visit. When I went online to view the high-res traffic cam photos, I found it was the buyer in my old car, but my name was still attached to the plates. After some serious yelling, I copied all of the records, dates, bill of sale, etc., and mailed copies off to the courthouse. It was his citation, but I had to prove it to the court. 2 weeks later, I got another letter from the fuzz, another ticket, this time for speeding. Same driver, same car, same plates with my name still attached. Again, I had to copy all the paperwork, write a long letter to the clerk, and mail it all off to the courthouse. The third ticket really makes me mad. I start making calls and discovered that this scam is pretty common. Some folks buy a junker and rack up fines until they wreck or abandon the car, and their name was never on it, so nobody bothers to punish them for it. It's all on the previous owner to clean up the mess and prove who was at fault. This time, I wrote an extra long letter to the court clerk and did a little research to include the guy's picture, address, and listed phone number. A few months went by, and I thought it was over. Heck, the car should have given out by now anyway. Then the fourth ticket arrived, showing him in high res, zipping past a radar cam in my old car with my old bumper sticker still on the back, and all his kids piled into the back seat. The fifth and sixth tickets felt like Groundhog's Day. I didn't even bother to put the paperwork away. I kept it out on my desk, ready to copy. By the time the seventh ticket arrived, we were well over a year beyond the sale, and enough was enough. This wasn't just some dude forgetting to do some paperwork or not knowing the right way to go about buying a car. This was intentional. It was time for some pro-revenge. First, I called the police, and after a week of back and forth, finally spoke with a traffic cop who said enough is enough and went to pay the guy a visit. He said he couldn't disclose what would happen during that discussion, but the total amount of the likely unpaid traffic tickets was enough to get his attention. The tickets and late fees were several times the value of the car. That wasn't enough. Just having to pay his tickets wasn't appropriate for the 7 times I had to copy that bill of sale for the court clerk. So I started going back through my records of every ticket and every photo, and I found an interesting theme. In every photo, his kids were in the car, including the infant, all packed into the back seat. I called CPS anonymously. I didn't provide any information that was not 100% factual and verifiable. The tickets showed that this guy was operating an identity fraud scheme out of his home, essentially stealing my identity and who knows how many others. His kids were present throughout. Furthermore, he regularly violated traffic rules and put his kids in danger by speeding, running red lights, and committing other traffic violations. If he was doing this stuff so often in front of a big white camera, how do you think he was driving when he wasn't being watched? I declined to provide my name or number as I had nothing more to offer and didn't want to be involved in the case any longer. I gave them all the evidence I had. After that, I stopped getting traffic tickets from him. Maybe the car finally gave out. Entitled parents on an airplane. Hello everyone. A few weeks ago, I got to experience my own entitled parent on an airplane moment, so I thought I might share it here. I live in a medium-sized Western European city with only a small domestic flights kind of airport. So when I fly international, I usually go to the closest big city with one of the biggest airports in Europe. I often take the bus to go there because it's way cheaper than the trains. The connections are not always well-timed, so sometimes I have to spend a few hours waiting for boarding. A few years ago, I discovered that Lufthansa often offers business class tickets for almost the same price as the economy tickets. There are also first class tickets, which are much more expensive, but that's another story. The difference between the business and economy tickets is that you get priority boarding, almost twice as much luggage allowed, and you are seated in business class. The middle seat is empty, and the food is way better. But for me, the biggest perk, the one which makes me pay 50 euros more, is that it gives you access to the business lounge at the airport. There is free food, and most importantly, coffee, there, and you can enjoy a comfy seat. So, when I have to wait 5 hours at the airport, I go the extra mile and take a business class ticket whenever possible. Now the story. A few weeks ago, I was going home to Moscow and had to wait 4 hours at the airport. I dropped off my luggage and went to the business lounge to wait. When you enter, you have to pass a security check, showing your boarding pass to the lady at the reception. Here, I have to say that I'm in my early 30s, but look younger, and when I travel, I try to be comfortable, so jeans and sweaters mostly, no fancy attire. I waited in line to get inside, and just in front of me, there was Karen. The suit, the bag, the hair, everything screamed, "Look at me!" And along with her was her little goblin, just screaming nonsense. Kids at airports are generally insufferable. The line didn't move for a few minutes, so I took off my headphones and listened in. Karen screaming something along the lines of, "I've been flying with your company for years. Let me in." The lady at the reception had to call security to help her explain that the lounge was only for people with business class tickets. Mind you, often not much more expensive than the regular ones. Karen finally gave up and stepped aside. But she stood close by, and when she saw that I was allowed inside, yelled something about how unfair it was. I was clearly cheating, as I was not rich enough to be there. I went inside and ignored her. Fast forward a few hours. I'm at my gate, waiting for boarding. And then, the horror. I spot Karen and the goblin waiting for the same flight. Great. The priority boarding is announced. I go inside, and I can feel Karen's glare on the back of my head. I ignore it once again, go to my seat, sit down, and wait for the plane to take off. I don't like the takeoffs, so I close my eyes and try to relax, listening to some music. About 10 minutes or so later, I feel someone pop on the seat next to mine. I must have dozed off because everything didn't immediately register to me, but I knew it was weird because the middle seat is always empty in business class. I reluctantly take off my sleeping mask, and oh no, it's the Goblin and Karen taking the seats. That's weird. I know they're not supposed to be here, but I don't see anything. Maybe they got an upgrade. A few minutes later, however, an older gentleman arrives, apologizing to the flight attendant for being late. And just as I suspected, Karen was at the man's seat, and Goblin was just taking the empty seat. The gentleman tried explaining that it was his seat, and they must have made a mistake. The following exchange followed. Karen:
Yes, because this young lady has stolen my seat.
Pointing at me. Me: no, I did not. I show them my boarding pass. Then, to my horror, the Goblin grabs my boarding pass and rips it with his little goblin hands. I'm not a shy person, and I'm not easily rattled. But man, I was shocked and did not know how to react to this blatant display of entitlement. The commotion made the flight attendant come to us. Mind you, the gentleman was standing as his seat was taken by Karen. Flight attendant: What's going on? Karen:
This jerk has taken my seat. Please remove her so I can sit next to my kid.
Man: It's her seat. Points at me. The kid just tore her boarding pass. The pieces are still in his hand. Karen:
Nonsense. Flight attendant, please change my seat. I don't want to sit next to this liar.
Karen screeched. The Goblin cried. The engines were rolling, so lots of noise. The flight attendant finally had enough and very politely but loudly said, "Lady, this is clearly not your seat. There is always an empty seat in business class. Please go to your seats and stop bothering the passengers, or I will remove you from the flight." Karen, feeling she was losing the battle, made a final attempt.
I'm a frequent flyer. The least you can do is bring me some complimentary wine.
With that, she yanked her kid and stormed to her seats in economy. This was the last I saw of them. The whole flight was uneventful afterwards, but I did get to know the old gentleman, and turns out he's often on Reddit too. So, if you're reading this, thank you for standing up for me. Next we've got Entitled Aunt ripped off my grandma for years, so I ruined her financially. This happened about 5 years ago. My grandma was getting old, late 80s, early 90s. She had one wish: to not live in a senior home. Easily done, as my grandpa sold some assets way back when, then invested the money and let it ride for over 30 years. He never touched it and collected a pension. Way back when my grandpa passed, about 10 years before this, my grandma appointed my dad, this crappy aunt, and my uncle as the trustees of the trust. Basically, the trusted advisors for her and her care for the foreseeable future. All was well in the beginning. Then my dad, Willie, moved further away and couldn't take care of the day-to-day upkeep as the trustee and to see that my grandma was okay. My aunt, Rebecca, told her that she and my uncle, Fred, who lived in Arizona, could take over and all would be fine. It was fine for a while. A few times my dad went back to visit and noticed my grandma didn't always have overnight care, or that her mail wasn't picked up and the driveway wasn't plowed. She also lost her cable TV and newspaper subscription. My dad figured it just lapsed, so he had the services put back on. My dad also noticed my grandma was eating moldy food at times because her truck was sold and she had no transportation. She drove up to 90 years old. She basically just chilled at the house alone and did crossword puzzles. The craziest part of this is that my aunt only lived 2 miles from my grandma, but my grandma told my dad she saw Aunt Rebecca once a week on Saturday for about 1 hour. As with the elderly and age, my grandma passed away. She did get her wish and was able to stay in her own home. After this, things started to get real interesting. Once the probate lawyer got her kids, my dad, aunt, uncle, and other estranged aunt, Becky, around the table, some shady business started to come out. My aunt Rebecca asked that everyone just forego any audit or paperwork and they just sell the house for around $400,000 and divide up the remaining bank account balance of roughly $400,000. So, just signing on the line, each sibling was to get a check for $200,000. Not too bad of an inheritance. My dad thought that was somewhat a little rushed. He said at the time that he wanted to wait because my grandma's house was easily in the $600,000 range based on size and location. My aunt exploded in his face, yelling at him and calling him all kinds of names because he was unwilling to sign the assets then and there. She basically wanted a quick close while everyone looked the other way. My dad ended up leaving the room after the screaming, and the deal wasn't signed that day. It took nearly 6 months before another appointment, and they were all back at the table. The thing is, though, when you are a trustee and the person passes away, the funds and access to financial accounts are all under heavy scrutiny until all beneficiaries are made aware and sign the final papers. At the next meeting, my dad went in there with no intention to sign the deal. He got his brother, my Uncle Fred, to agree that they audit the entire accounts going back 5 years. When they demanded this again at the meeting with the lawyer, my aunt ended up arguing that a forensic audit would cost them $5,000 and it's a waste. Like, what difference does it make? 2 beneficiaries requested it, so it was what was going to happen. The audit report showed up about 3 months later. Here's where it gets good. My dad began looking over the audit report and saw it was full of holes, like excessive monthly food costs for a 90-year-old lady, payments made for car services for a car my grandma no longer had, many different things in there that just didn't add up. My dad asked me to give the audit a second look, so I spent a Saturday night going over it, and here's some crazy stuff I found and alerted my dad about. Costco monthly food costs of $1,100 to $2,000 for the last 4 years. Telephone bills for 6 cell phones. Grandma has a home phone only. Gasoline for a truck my grandma didn't have for like 4 years and easily $400 a month. House repairs paid to my aunt's husband who owned a construction business. Some of the house repairs were like $16,000 for a new roof, new garage doors, home security system, which she didn't have, etc. All inflated prices. Grandma paid for my aunt to go to Europe twice on vacation. My grandma was paying my estranged Aunt Becky a stipend of $2,000 a month for the last 5 years, as well as her deadbeat son for $2,500. Every month they were paid. All grandkids were to be paid a lump sum of $10,000 upon their 30th birthday, as that is when the $50 check from grandma stopped for all grandkids. Guess who was paid out? Her kids and my estranged aunt's kids, but not me or my siblings. My grandma gave loans to my Aunt Rebecca for her husband's construction business in return for equity in the company, which amounted to nothing. These loans totaled about $200,000 over 3 years, right around when the housing bust happened. They also sold her assets like jewelry and whatnot for cash because some big-ticket items simply vanished from her house. Armed with all of this, the next probate meeting was interesting. In the time between my grandma's passing and the third probate meeting, my aunt's construction business filed for bankruptcy, so that $200,000 in equity grandma had simply vanished. The probate lawyer was also somewhat concerned and makes it obvious that this was fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, where my aunt could actually get real prison time. After this, the negotiations were much more favorable. My aunt got nothing, literally zero. My other aunt only received $25,000 after all the stipend payments. My father and uncle shared the rest after all grandkids received the $10,000 payout. The house sold to the first offer for $520,000. That was the regular revenge for any treacherous jerk that ripped off grandma and had her eat moldy food. Here is the pro. My aunt probably felt pretty bad that she couldn't supplement her lifestyle with grandma's money anymore, but that was the least of her worries. Since she tried to personally rip me off for $10,000, I took it personally. I don't care how tough you are. The IRS is the scariest thing that can happen to a person. Nobody wants to have their money forcibly removed. I did a little research and found the 3949-A. I also had the audit and the legal office that would provide the full trust if requested or demanded by the IRS. I don't know if it ever was. So I photocopied my documents, had them notarized, and sent off the info to the IRS. I felt like it went nowhere. Then, maybe 18 months later, I was notified and asked to come to the IRS building for an appointment in my city. The agent went over all the details, what they found in their research, and then they asked for a sworn statement. It turns out my aunt didn't declare something like 1.2 million in additional income over 5 years, and as such, she owed the IRS around $420,000 plus penalties. There was no way she was going to pay that on a teacher's pension, and after her husband has bankrupted his business. Her house was sold, her vehicle sold, and they left the state. Now, aunt and uncle live in a depressing desert town in the Southwest. The IRS paid me around $60,000 about 3 months after the appointment. She should have paid that $10,000. Next we've got Entitled Dad ruins a Marvel premiere at the theater. Hey guys, this is my first post here, so I hope I don't mess up. It's also a pretty old story, and I don't think I can disclose which movie I'm talking about, but it's one of 2019's MCU movies that was premiering in the theater where I work. So let's start with this. The theater where I work is small. It's situated in a meek town, so nothing happens here. Most people who really cared about this film went to see it in the city, so there wasn't that much movement, and we played it in our smallest screening room. 30 to 40 people came in, mostly teens or parents with their kids. In walks Entitled Dad. Balding guy in a black jacket with a little kid, 10 at best. I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea how this started. I didn't serve the man and his son. I completely missed them coming in and only caught on to the situation later. But basically, they bought tickets and went to their assigned screen after buying some snacks. The audience took their seats. One of us workers checked the screen for temperature and phones, and all was well. Now we check the screens a few times per screening. We have signs on all the doors and by the steps leading to the screens that ask audiences to turn off their phones. There's also an announcement before every film that asks you the same thing: turn off the phones. If you care to read one of those countless signs, you'll know that if you are caught using your phone in the screening room, you will be asked to leave. Entitled Dad apparently couldn't read, or couldn't care less. We're strict on this because phones are really distracting. When we, workers, step into the dark room, the first thing we see from the door is the person's phone because it's so bright in the theater lighting. They're really visible and annoying to other spectators, silenced or not. Next time the screening was checked, Entitled Dad was on his phone. He was asked to turn it off. He instead grumbled and stuck it in his pocket. Then we checked the screen again after a few minutes and again asked Entitled Dad to turn it off. That's when Entitled Dad decides to argue. The worker dealing with him was almost brought to tears because he was so rude, and she went to get the manager. Now, our manager is a big guy, buff as heck, tall and dangerous looking. He's a teddy bear though. But the worker who was almost brought to tears was his sister, and he wasn't nice to the person who was mean to her. Our manager goes to Entitled Dad and asks him to leave. Entitled Dad throws a fit. He starts to yell at the manager, angry that he has to watch this stupid movie, and that he should be allowed on his phone because he's only there so his son can see it. We don't let kids under 12 in without their parent or guardian, so yes, he had to be there if he wanted to sit with his son. Still, phones were prohibited. He claimed we should let him be on his phone and distract all the other audience members because he would be bored otherwise, all while shouting at the staff and disrupting the movie, which was already running. One of our workers had to run upstairs to the control room to pause the movie. 6 months of working in that theater, and that's the only time this had happened. Our manager finally won the argument and got Entitled Dad to leave and take his poor son with him. I'm still sorry for the kid because I'm sure he wanted to watch that movie. The manager apologized profusely to the remaining audience, and the newest MCU movie continued to play. I had people coming out to grab some more snacks mid-premiere, and they asked me about Entitled Dad and offered us support because they were worried about the staff. We also apologized again for the inconvenience, and they said it wasn't our fault. They were glad Entitled Dad was gone. My manager mostly laughed about it. He said it wasn't a big deal. These things happen. His sister was shaken, but fine. We went ahead with our daily duties. Then it turned out Entitled Dad wasn't gone after all. In he marches, all alone this time. Maybe he didn't want to scare his kid anymore. But I don't think he deserves the credit for thoughtfulness, so maybe his son was simply too shaken to return with him. Anyway, Entitled Dad walks up to the tickets booth and asks, I kid you not, for a refund. The manager laughed and told him no way in heck is he getting a refund. We're usually really understanding and refunds aren't difficult to do, but my manager wasn't willing to cooperate with Entitled Dad after he made the manager's sister and his own son cry and disrupted the premiere for a few dozen people. Besides, he broke the rules knowing he would be asked to leave, and the movie was more than half an hour in. He had no right to ask for a refund. He called my manager rude and demanded again that he gets a refund because he was kicked out of the cinema and his son's day was ruined. Duh, you ruined it, Entitled Dad. The manager said no and told Entitled Dad to leave. Entitled Dad started yelling and insulting our manager, but he was halfway out the door when he yelled at my manager that he was a brainless piece of testosterone-injected meat, and that he thinks he's so scary with all that muscle, but he won't be so scary when his butt is sued. So yeah, dude threatened my manager with a lawsuit while my manager was laughing his head off. The lawsuit never came. Neither did the dude return. Next we've got, demand a raise when you can't even do your job? Karen, you're fired. For context, I work in the family business. Without going into specifics, because it'd definitely be easy to find, we make things in a niche industry and sell those online. I manage production while my dad manages admin and customer relations. Due to some medical issues that cropped up for myself, we found ourselves a little short-handed. It's a small business after all. Apart from immediate family, we're generally pretty reluctant to hire friends or acquaintances. Because of the circumstances, we made an exception here, as my mother knew a capable admin person who was looking for a new job. For the sake of simplicity, this new hire we'll call Karen. She interviewed well, had loads of experience, on paper, and seemed pretty switched on. We thought it would be a good fit, and after checking her references, gave her a job. Now, it's important to note a few details that were explicitly stated in the interview. It's a casual position with the opportunity for part-time in the future. In my country, casual means a bump in hourly rate, but no paid sick leave or annual leave. The inflated hourly rate is there to compensate for not having those. The pay rate was stated as X amount of dollars, which was well above the industry standard, but a little less than her previous position. The job was not at the same level as her previous position. Where I live, there's government guidelines on pay scale, and there's levels for positions. This was essentially a level 2 admin position. Her previous one was a level 3. She accepted these conditions in the interview and seemed keen to start right away. From the start, we started seeing issues. She was very slow to pick things up. She got confused if you gave her anything other than simple task instructions. We couldn't give her a bunch of jobs to work through, as she'd start on all of them at the same time, get confused, start doing tasks for one job, and documenting them in another job. Even the most basic task we assigned her, filing, was a complete mess. At some point, she must have given up and chose a new filing method, where if it's not visible, it's been filed. 6 months after the fact, we're still finding income receipts and shipping folders, invoices to be paid and receivables. You get the idea. She was also extremely rude to anyone younger than her, basically 90% of the staff. We kept getting whiffs of a sense of extreme entitlement. Anyone other than myself and my dad was obviously beneath her, to the point where she would refuse instructions from anyone other than us. Anyway, this obviously couldn't continue. We stuck it out for her trial period, witnessing a true comedy of errors on a daily basis. The final nail in the coffin happened a couple days before her trial concluded. On a Friday afternoon, she walked into my dad's office. The abridged conversation, which I could slightly overhear, went something like this. Please note, she had only been working with us for a little over a month. Karen.
I'd like to take 3 weeks of annual leave.
Dad. What? You're casual. You don't get annual leave.
Karen, shocked face. That's not what you told me in the interview. You're not paying me enough.
She storms out. So on a Friday night, I was instructed to go over the pay scales and position requirements to make sure we were paying her correctly. I didn't think it'd be an issue because we were above industry standard, but I was forced to double check, print off this information, as well as average wages for the industry. She was on the right side of the bell curve, unsurprisingly. Monday rolls around, and my dad had a commitment that took him out of the office, so I was instructed to sit down with Karen and figure out what the heck she was on about. and eventually show her the door. I remained respectful during the encounter, as I had a feeling she was the kind of person to seek legal recourse and go to industry watchdogs if she was given half a chance. Me. So, Karen, I heard you had a bit of a disagreement with Dad. Karen.
Yes, you're not paying me enough if I'm casual.
Well, I spent most of Friday night going through government pay scales.
Well, if you did, you'd know that I'm not getting paid for the position I'm entitled to.
We were pretty clear in the interview.
No, you weren't. You said this was a part-time position. I'm a level 3 super secretary.
That's not the position you interviewed for. Look, to be honest, the quality of your work really doesn't match that level anyway. We've noticed that you're struggling to pick things up, and there's a fair few mistakes that are costing us quite a bit of time. Karen is fuming. To be clear, this is the pay rate. It's a casual position. I'm sorry that both myself and Dad may not have explained it in a way that was clear to you, but this is it. If you're not happy with that, you can go. Karen.
Yeah, I'm going to go. I'm done.
Okay. Karen walks out. 10 seconds later, slams open the door.
And another thing, you need to train your staff properly. How am I supposed to do work when you don't show me what I need to do?
Okay.
I'm the only one who did any work in this place.
Okay.
How did you expect me to do my job if you're using the main workstation all the time?
Okay. Workstation is my primary desk. I'd vacated it for the hours she was in, only using it if I needed to print something for production. The tasks that she needed the workstation for was primarily checking emails, which she didn't do, and booking and transport for goods, which she couldn't do without my help. Oh, the irony. Me. I'm sorry this hasn't worked out. Motion to the door. Karen storms out in a huff, stopping to take a notebook with her that had a crap load of proprietary information. I had to contact her later to make sure it was destroyed. Karen's stated secretary level, the one she believed she was entitled to, was an executive level. You know, those guys and girls that manage the entire schedule for a CEO or philanthropist? We later found out that she basically set herself at that level along with a ridiculous salary at her previous position because it was a non-profit that her sister was the treasurer of. Her references were all people that were involved in basically a scam to defraud money from a non-profit. They were all promptly fired once it came to light in a fairly flat manner. They didn't do anything strictly illegal, as the salaries had to be voted on by committee, which her sister pushed through. But I really don't see any difference between her and some big wig making a suck fund. It's just a different degree of fraud. The level of incompetence she displayed doing her job is, as I previously mentioned, still being felt. We found, and still find, emails with incorrect invoices sent out, glitches in our database that we struggle to untangle and financially reconcile, random bits of paperwork everywhere. We even found an invoice that needed to be paid stashed behind one of our printers. This was a utility bill that only sends out paper invoices. We didn't even know about it until we were well overdue on payment. To conclude, forget you, Karen. You made more work for us than you saved with your incompetent, entitled attitude. P.S. I don't know how, but this is the second time this has happened on hiring admin staff. I don't know what it is about this position, but it seems to attract some of the worst people on the planet.
My son is a professional gamer, so he must get this for free.
So, I'll tell a little bit of backstory. In Finland, we have this thing called TED, which is like a work experience thing. In the 8th grade, it lasts a week. I was 14, and I had taken a job in a tech store. It was good. I am somewhat nerdy, and I know about technology and computers. This is all translated from the Finnish conversation. I am a high school student, and my English might have some mistakes. We've got entitled kid, Esports kid. We've got entitled mom. We've got me. We've got the store manager, Pekka, change name. So I had been working there for a few days, and it was Thursday, around 2 p.m. I had about an hour left of work time since the TET rule said that the work time was 6 hours. I was behind a cash register desk, filling the cabinets with some phones that had arrived in a shipment that day. Then the entitled mom and entitled kid entered in. The store manager was in the storage. The mom was in her 40s, and the kid was about 11 to 13. Me. Hello, Welcome to the tech store. How can I help you? Entitled Mom.
Good afternoon. My son is looking for a keyboard.
I point to my left where the gaming products were, and they were mostly Razer products available. The others were sold out, and the store didn't have much of the accessories. Me. On that shelf. Feel free to look around.
Thanks.
The entitled mom and the entitled kid walked over, and I kept on filling the cabinet. I heard some discussion from behind me, but I didn't bother to listen to it. Sometime later, I was done and looked over to them. They were looking at the prices and thinking about it. Me. Need some help? Entitled Mom.
Yeah, I don't understand the difference between this Black Widow Ultimate Chroma and this Ornata Chroma. They look alike. Can you please tell me the difference?
Entitled Kid.
Mom, the Black Widow is better. It's mechanical, like I told you.
The kid had this high-pitched voice, a really irritating one. Me. Your son is right. The difference is that the Black Widow is mechanical and has faster response times than the Ornata, which is mechanical. The Black Widow is also more expensive, but that is logical since it was mechanical. The entitled mom looked over to the entitled kid who was smiling. Entitled Mom.
We will take this one then.
The entitled mom walked to the register and I scanned the barcode. The keyboard was 129 euros. Me. All right, ma'am. That will be 129 euros.
What? 130 euros for a piece of plastic? What the heck?
Me. Calm down, ma'am. It's the normal price.
My son plays competitively. He needs this.
Me. Really? Well, what does he play? The entitled kid looked at me.
I play CSGO in a professional team.
I just looked at him, holding my laughter. This kid just told me that he plays a K through 16 game professionally. It was hilarious. K through 16 is the equivalent of the ESRB rating teen. Me, sarcastic tone. Oh, really? What is the team name? The kid smiled more. His smile kinda looked like a troll face. Entitled Kid.
Our team is called Killer Bee Esports.
I just bursted into laughter. This kid had just told me a group that I didn't know of. I laugh. Hold on, I'll check. I looked up the team on my phone and found a Steam group and looked at it. The members had ridiculous names. I was laughing so hard because the kid was so serious about being professionals. Me. I'm sorry, kid, but this gaming group is far from being professional. Even if you were professionals, I couldn't give you this keyboard for free since you aren't sponsored by us. The store was a part of a chain. The mom was looking at me, being very angry.
What are you laughing at? He is a professional gamer. He is good. I have watched him play. We need to get this for free. You are so rude, young man.
Me. I'm sorry, but he's not a professional. I see no awards or anything to reference some sort of esport activity. Entitled Kid.
I used to play for the 3D Max Juniors.
That doesn't exist, and that isn't even finished. I just laughed even harder. I couldn't help it. This kid was so bad at lying. Are you kidding me? Look at you. You're not old enough to play CSGO. Not professionally.
His age? That's your best argument? How old are you?
I'm 14.
You're 14 and you call my son young? Shame on you.
It's my tet week, so it's part-time. Entitled Mom was looking at her son with a weird smile, and the kid smiled back. She turned to me.
We'll make a compromise. I will pay the full price.
I was getting suspicious from the tone of her voice, which had turned to a kind and soft voice. And
I get those headphones from the shelf.
Points to a pair of Razer Kraken 7.1S, 110 euros. I looked at her with an annoyed gaze and stayed quiet for a moment. Are you kidding me? You're asking for a keyboard and a headset for the price of one? I explained to her that we have some bundles sometimes, but she just can't make one out of thin air. She just looked at me, annoyed.
Let me talk to your manager.
Okay. Points to some security cameras. Don't think of trying to leave. You have cameras watching you. I walked to the warehouse and called for the store manager, Pekka, to come and help me with a customer. Surprisingly, the entitled mom and entitled kid hadn't left. Manager. Hello, ma'am. I'm Pekka. What seems to be the problem?
Your part-time employee is rude to me and makes fun of my son.
That's not entirely true. She claimed her son is a professional gamer on a team, and they are trying to get equipment for free. Manager: Ma'am, is this true?
No, he's lying.
The manager just stood there, looking at the angry mom, her kid, and me. I'll check the camera recordings. He said that and went into the security room. Sometime later, he came out. Ma'am, I have to ask you to pay for the keyboard and leave.
What the heck? He's rude to me and my son. We need these for free. My son is traumatized after your behavior.
Manager: The other option is for you to not pay and leave without the keyboard. Entitled mom just looked at us and hesitantly paid for the keyboard and was about to leave until she yelled from the front door.
You lost a customer for life. I'm not coming back here ever again.
Despite her actions, my work experience went well. I got good points for the work. Sometimes when I go to the store, I talk with Pekka about the pro player kid and we laugh. Surprisingly, the entitled mom or the kid never visited the store anymore. Next we've got Karen drops her phone down the elevator shaft. I work for a company that services elevators. This includes calls from our clients, as well as answering the emergency phones inside the elevators if people become stuck. 95% of the time that we get a call from inside an elevator, it's just kids or someone who hit the button by accident. 4% of the time, we actually have someone stuck, and the other 1% of the time, it's Karen. My phone rings, so I glance over to check which language I need to answer in and see that it's actually from inside an elevator. I pick it up, thinking it's another prank call, find the address in my system, and prepare to say, "Hello, is there anyone there?" for about 30 seconds, then go back to playing Stardew Valley on my phone. Not today. Today, Karen had other plans. I quickly get out the standard intro, and to my surprise, there's actually someone on the other end of the line. Karen:
Hi, I need to speak to a manager or something.
Yes, she actually said, "or something," with the inflection of a question. Now, there is so much stupid packed into that one question that I am almost speechless. Let's unpack the stupid, shall we? Stupid point 1. She's using an emergency elevator phone and wasting an emergency response line's time to try and make a complaint. I know I said I was playing Stardew Valley, but you're on Reddit. Don't judge me. 2. Her question doesn't make sense. Does she want my manager? We have thousands of employees and dozens of offices. Does she want the account rep for her building? Does she want the supervisor or the technician who handles her building? Does she want the manager of her local branch? Is this about a bill? I don't know what Karen wants, and I'm pretty sure I left my Nintendo Switch at home, so it can't be that. 3. We cannot give or share any information to anyone who is not with building management. In fact, anyone who is not with building management should not even know our phone number. At the time, I had no idea, but Karen has already been told this by building management and does not know our number, which is why she is calling from the emergency phone. Me: Can I ask what this is regarding?
No, give me a manager.
Well, Karen, the problem is we have hundreds of managers who manage different things. I need to know what type of thing you're having trouble with, so I know which manager to transfer you to.
The manager in charge of elevators.
By now, my spider sense is tingling, and I'm opening up the building history. Something stinks, and it's the all too familiar smell of Karen's BS. Me: Please hold while I get the manager of elevators. I place Karen on hold to get her good and wound up before I make her feel stupid. Me: Hi Karen, thank you for holding. Before I put you through to the manager of elevators, I just need to confirm. Did you call us this morning to request a technician come to retrieve a phone dropped down the crack beneath the elevator door on the 9th floor? Karen:
No.
She knows she's busted. And at the time, you were told to contact building management, as we cannot dispatch a technician unless building management requests it, or we have someone trapped in an elevator?
No.
She knows what's coming next. And after that, did you call again pretending to be trapped in the elevator with a baby in an effort to bypass building maintenance and get us to send a technician to the site? I can hear her starting to tear up.
I was trapped in the elevator, and there was no ventilation, and my baby was getting very hot, and I needed to get him to the doctor.
I understand. Did you try dialing 911 while you were trapped?
No. because I dropped.
She was about to say she dropped it down the elevator and was realizing she was about to get caught in a lie.
It was out of batteries.
Me. Please hold. I put her on mute to get her even more wound up. Go to the bathroom and come back. Me. Hi, Karen. Thanks for holding. She doesn't say anything. Hi, Karen. Are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, great. I was worried I'd lost you. Now, when the technician arrived, he found that the elevator was still working and diagnostics showed no errors. In fact, in the 35 minutes between your call and the technician arriving, the elevator was used 8 times, and that there is no record of anyone being trapped.
Yes, that's what he said, but he wasn't there. I was trapped for over an hour with my baby who has a fever.
Please hold. Eat my sandwich, chicken salad. I love my life. Me. Hi, Karen. Thanks for holding. I just need to confirm. When our technician arrived to have you released from the elevator, were you waiting in the lobby, and did you demand he retrieve your phone from the elevator shaft?
Yes.
And when he told you to contact building management to get the $900 elevator pit retrieval fee approved, did you begin screaming at him to retrieve your phone immediately, or you would get him fired?
Well, I wasn't screaming.
And when this happened, who was watching the baby?
What baby?
The one you were stuck in the elevator with that had a fever.
Oh, she was upstairs. I put her down.
So you left an infant alone so you could yell at the technician.
Are you telling me how to parent my...
Please hold. Water my blueberries in Stardew Valley. Okay, Karen. What I am doing right now, I'm putting a note in the system to have your phone retrieved free of charge from the elevator shaft.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. We will be retrieving it for you on the next scheduled maintenance day, which will be within the next 3 to 6 weeks.
3 to 6 weeks? You can't send someone today?
Sure, but first, you need to contact building management to call us and approve the $900 elevator shaft retrieval fee, in addition to the $500 fine for faking an emergency that you'll be receiving from your landlord. Karen hung up before I was able to transfer her to the manager of elevators. I later spoke with building management, who was livid. Karen had originally spoken to them about the phone. However, she refused to be billed for it, so management refused to make the call. Her baby wasn't sick. In fact, it didn't exist, unless her baby is 4 cats. I hope she isn't too surprised in 3 to 6 weeks when she gets the shattered pieces of her phone back. Next we've got, in my 35 years of being in sales and management, this was by far the most interesting performance review I have ever witnessed. Guys, I know this is long, but I assure you, this is a juicy one. I was working with a B2B sales company. We sold services to companies basically. After this company had managed to hire the most incompetent, lazy, and jealous sales manager I have ever come across. We were a team of 5 salespeople and a sales manager. All 5 of us salespeople hated our sales manager for various reasons, but we liked her personally. I was the top salesperson on the team. I was sitting at 170% of my yearly objective and was well on my way to President's Club. This is largely because I was the only salesperson on the team with real sales experience, and the sales manager was too incompetent to train a team. So my VP came down for our yearly performance reviews, and I was called in first. It was my VP and Mrs. B, short for jerk. I was expecting a positive performance review. Right off the bat, Mrs. B hits me with,
Sting, you know our location hasn't been performing at objective for a number of years, and we suspect this is because salespeople are misrepresenting their daily work.
I'm taken back.
Sting, I don't think you are actually doing what you say you are doing in your CRM. This is something you could get fired for.
I looked at Mrs. B and I said, Really? She said,
Yeah.
I hit her back with, I'm shocked you decided to go this route. Mrs. B, with a confident smile, said,
We gotta do what it takes to get this location on objective.
I said, All right, let's play a game. Mrs. B, pick a day. Any day in the CRM, and let me prove to you that I went to all my appointments and did all my stops as recorded.
Well, Sting, I'm not saying you never go in the field,
I just think some days you stay at home and put in BS notes in the CRM. I said, Mrs. B, pick a day. Any day. Pick a day you think I lied about my sales activities. So Mrs. B picks a day. Now I'm smiling ear to ear, and I am heated. I notice the VP is smiling at me, and his head is slanted to one side. I suspected he knew Mrs. B was about to get absolutely owned, and he was right. So she gives me the day, and I turn to the VP. Mr. VP, are you aware of how Android phones work? VP responds, enlighten me. I said, by default, Android has location services turned on, and in fact, Google will track where you went and when. Naturally, I carry my phone everywhere. So let's compare what Google says I did that day to what my CRM says. So I pull up my Google location services for that day, and surprise, surprise, it's a match. Mrs. B is obviously very concerned at this point. I said, I'm actually quite enjoying this performance review. Let's pick another day, Mrs. B. Mrs. B fires back. We don't need to do that. I turn to the VP. Mr. VP, would you mind picking a day? He says, sure. What about XYZ? He pulls up my CRM. I pull my location services for that day. Guess what? It's a match. I then get ready to pull out the big guns. Mr. VP, do you remember company XYZ with a contract value of excess $1 million that we lost recently? Yes, Sting, I remember. Apparently our competitor won them over on price. We can't win them all. Mr. VP, here is an email from their VP basically stating that they've decided not to go with us for our failure to provide 3 samples for them to decide on which product worked best for them. Sting, can you forward that to me? Sure, not a problem, Mr. VP. Forward it over. Mr. VP, while I'm at this, let me forward you over several email chains before this where I clearly asked Mrs. B to order those samples. In fact, in those very same email chains, she confirmed that she had in fact ordered the sample. He asked me to forward those emails to him, so I did. Now, Mr. VP, I had our service department look to see if any orders had been placed for these samples. No orders were actually placed. He said, I'm going to look into this. Mrs. B is sweating bullets at this point. My performance review has just turned into her performance review, and it's not going right. Mr. VP, I have one more thing I'd like to bring to your attention. Do you mind if I step outside for a minute so I can show you? He said, sure. I need to have a talk with Mrs. B anyway. Now, I need to mention that several years prior to this, a general manager at another location hurt someone. The company was sued and lost a lot of money because of this. Since this incident, the company put in a very clear-cut policy: no relationships between management and people who work for them. It's immediate termination for the manager. Now, another sales consultant in the office was named Joe. Joe was a married man with a family, and Mrs. B had the hots for him. She tried to get with him multiple times, twice on text. Joe and I had talked about if he should report this transgression. I walked into the sales office and said, Joe, I think it's time we get a new sales manager. You got those texts? He looks at me and goes, Is today going to be the day? I said, Today is going to be the day. All the sales staff knew what was going on. The mood in the office was lifted. Joe and I began walking back to the conference room when the location manager, who was not a part of the performance review, saw Joe and I. He asked, What's going on? And Joe said, You're going to need to hire a new sales manager soon. Location manager was confused. He said he's coming into the meeting. We said fine. I knocked on the door. Mr. VP said come on in, so I did. There we stood, Joe, myself, and the location manager. Mrs. B knew exactly what was about to happen. We all took our seats, and I asked the VP, Mr. VP, I just want to clarify a company policy. Sure. Is it true that if a manager tried to engage in a relationship with a direct report, that it's immediate termination for that manager? Mr. VP sits up straight, takes a moment, and goes, Yes, if something like that came to my attention, my hands would be tied. I'd have to fire the manager. I said, Well, Joe has something he wants to show you. Mrs. B got up and walked out of the conference room. She was about to cry, you could tell. Her world, her career, had just completely wrecked, and I don't think she wanted to be around for the end. Joe went on to tell the VP how he's a happily married man with a family, and Mrs. B kept hitting on him. In fact, she had sent him numerous unwanted texts, and on 2 occasions openly invited him to get with her, once in the office and once at his home, even after he made it clear he wasn't going to get with her. Mr. VP asked to see the texts, and Joe provided them. The VP asked him to screenshot those and email those over. Joe said he would. Then the VP said, "I'm going to need both of you to go back to the sales office. The location manager and I have some talking to do." We walked back into the sales office. I noticed the sales manager office looked cleaned out. Apparently, Mrs. B was bawling. She was a wreck and crying, and said she was going home. Joe laughed and said, "Yeah, she won't be coming back." It was about 20 to 25 minutes when the VP came into the sales office and asked me to come to the conference room again, so I did. I sat down and the VP said, "Well, I would like to inform you that Mrs. B has been terminated effectively immediately. With this being said, after your performance review and looking over your numbers, you are a top sales rep in this location and deserve nothing short of stellar remarks on your review, and you'll be getting that." I said, "Thank you. I do have one question." He said, "Sure, anything. How do I apply for a new sales manager job that just opened up?" Mr. VP laughed and said, "You sure do like to strike while the iron is hot, don't you?" I said I do, and he said he would let the location manager know and I'd be able to put in my application. I thanked him and he said, "No, thank you. In my 35 years of being in sales and sales management, this was by far the most interesting performance review I have ever witnessed." I did not end up getting promoted. I ended up quitting shortly after this because they decided to not promote me and instead hired a guy with no sales experience to be our sales manager, and this rubbed me the wrong way. Also, our service department sucked and couldn't deliver on what I was selling, and another company offered me more money. He took $25,000 from me. It ended up costing him $500,000. I was married to a very OCD and pragmatic man. For example, for him, a big romantic gesture had been to leave me alone for 24 hours at the hospital right after I had our son, so he could go pay bills and mow the lawn. 20 years later, I do understand he really did express love this way, but that's another story. So I divorced him. Not just for what's above, mind you. I felt alone and unloved in this relationship. I just wrote about it to explain the state of mind I was in when I met this other person that we'll call PS. PS was the total opposite. He was very in tune with his emotions. He was very, very intense. This will be important later. He expressed his love like I thought I needed. On our first date, the waitress asked how long we had been together since he was so into me. He made me feel amazing. He had a huge house and a rather flashy lifestyle, so I assumed he was really well off. He told me he owned a car wash and a phone marketing company. Fast forward a bit. At this point, we had been dating for about a year, and he just asked me and my son to move in with him. I wasn't 100% sure, but he prepared the room for my son nonetheless. As I started spending more time in his house, still keeping mine, I also started to see strange behavior. He'd be up all night, but sleep all day. I also overheard a few phone calls where he was telling people they owed money and needed to pay, but the conversations didn't fit with a car wash or phone marketing business. At some point, he told me he was having money problems. He said huge clients were late in paying and that this was jeopardizing his house payments. So I, stupid me, offered to help. I'm missing a part of this story because it started as me offering help with the house since we were there a lot. Still had my house though. But it ended up with me lending him $25,000. I cannot for the life of me remember that progression. The loan was supposed to be for 3 weeks, he said. I'd have it all back in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That $25,000 came from my retirement savings / son's college money, so I had to pay a fine to access it. It's also money it took me 10 years to put aside. That money was very important to me. During those 3 weeks, I went out to have drinks with my friends and found him on a date with another woman. I saw him kissing her. I said nothing. went to his house, packed my stuff, and left. So anyway, I thought he'd be an adult and would still reimburse the $25,000 at the end of the 3 weeks. A big mistake. Someone I knew told me he was glad I left and proceeded to tell me about him. He said PS was a junkie, hence why he was so intense and so into his emotions. That also explained the erratic sleep/night patterns, but the final blow was when he told me that PS was also a con man, a specialist in defrauding older people by phone, his so-called phone marketing company. In the beginning, I wasn't sure I believed it, but then bits of what I had overheard in the last year started to make sense, and I realized it was all true. Back to this later. I tried having my money back many different ways. None worked. I was at the end of my rope, and since it was in my years post-divorce, and right after the 2008-2009 economic crash as well, I was poor as heck. So this is what I did. First, he had given me access to pay bills online, not to his bank accounts, but to his emails, so I was able to investigate all his accounts with the same password. I printed and screenshot every little bit of information relating to money. I found proof that he was indeed scamming people and found the people he worked with and even the name of the person at Western Union who facilitated the money transfer. I found out he was an organized criminal. I also found out he did this between the two countries. I started preparing strike one. So for strike one, I printed his face and the face of everyone working for/with him from their online profiles in defrauding people and left hundreds of flyers in his neighborhood. I also called the hotline for financial crime prevention in both the countries and gave very specific details and names. Know that even if he had given me the money, this goes against my core values, and I would have done the same thing either way. At this point, I was preparing strike two too. I was dumb in lending him money, but at least I did it the right way. I wrote a check. I didn't do cash. I wanted proof just in case. It would turn out to be a great idea. On the check, I had written that it was a loan. Thank you, Judge Judy, for this tip. Since he didn't pay me back, I prepared an invoice and sent it to me from his hacked email. When the time came to do my taxes, I filed the $25K as an expense using this invoice. I have many freelancers. I slid him as one of them. And it passed. Don't ask me how I got his social. I can't remember. But I ended up having access to it, so ratted him out to the IRS for hiding income. I found out later on through friends that the IRS started investigating him for unpaid taxes. I heard he had to pay 38% taxes on that $25K, plus a 20% fine for not declaring income. At this point, I was satisfied. I figured $9,500 in taxes plus $5,000 in fines was 50% of what he owed me. At least he didn't get away with it all. But remember, I told you on the check I had written that it was a loan. So I took about 2 to 3 years, but I took him to court and won. He didn't even show up. So he has to reimburse the full $25,000 plus court fees, plus what he owes to the IRS. So it's $39,500 that he was to pay for not reimbursing $25,000. To this day, I still haven't seen a cent, but the rest of the story makes it worthwhile. For a while, I thought the financial crime call I made had no effect. Now, the cherry on top. What I didn't know at the time is that the IRS would team up with Wire Fraud Division and look at everything he did. They were not able to catch him on the wire fraud, but since the house he had did not fit with the money he was declaring, they got him on tax evasion and gave him a certain delay to pay back taxes. I heard it was only 3 months, but I don't know if it's accurate. They got him so good, they ended up freezing his accounts, and he lost the house. The bank foreclosed it, and his debt to the IRS is still open. We are not in the US, so he won't go to jail for this, however. But my $25,000 that he did not want to repay ended up costing him over $500,000. And since you cannot go bankrupt for a debt you owe to the government, I'm happy to tell you that at 40 years old, he had to move back with his parents and ask for welfare, and will probably be paying this for the rest of his life. This story is not finished, however. I just learned that he now has a job as a concierge in the apartment building of his parents. So I'll be contacting the court to have the money he owes me taken directly from his pay. The thing is, he has no idea I'm the culprit of all his bad fortune, and he recently sent me a message telling me he misses me, that I was an angel for him, and that he regrets what he did. Well, not me, loser. Not me. Next we've got,
Let me speak to your manager, young man. I will have you fired. The owner and I are good friends.
First, let me explain a few things here. This is not my story as such, but I got to witness it firsthand. A good friend of mine is from a family that owns 3 very successful Italian restaurants, with a pizza oven that uses actual wood, really top of the line. So he learned the business basically from the day he could walk. When he was 25, he had a good business idea. A place in the middle of the city that sells mostly slices out a window, but also whole pizza, pasta dishes, and salad, and does delivery, plus a few small tables inside if someone wants to eat there. So he created a solid business plan and had his eyes on a prime location. It's 50 meters away from the biggest parking area in the city, with 400 parking spots, where several times a year we have big city fairs, and anybody who wants to go in the park strolls right by it. So his dad said he would finance him, but as a credit to be paid back in a timely manner. They agreed on everything, and a year later he opened up. The story takes place about 2 years after they have opened, and the place is hot. He already repaid almost 75% of the credit in a mere 2 years. Usually there is a line for the slices, which are from a family-sized pizza, like 60 centimeters across, and you get 1/8 for $2.50 to $3.50, depending on what is on it. We are sitting on a table playing chess while his guys run the shop. He had already worked a full 11 hours that day. In comes a baby boomer couple, and it was clear as day that the lady with the you-know-which haircut rules this relationship with an iron fist. They sat down on the table next to us, and after not even a minute, she rudely asked us why she has no menu yet and to get off our lazy butts. I already wanted to tell her I do not work here, but he winked at me and walked over to their table, giving them our menus. I'll call her entitled lady and my friend just friend. Disclaimer, this was nearly 15 years ago, so the spoken words are not word for word, but represent what was said. Entitled lady.
It's about time you get off your lazy butt.
She has waited a minute.
You can't play chess when you have people waiting. What kind of crappy service is this?
So he took their drink orders and walked behind the bar to make their drinks right away. They had to wait maybe 3 minutes for their drinks. They ordered beer that takes a bit to do correctly. Hefeweizen for you Germans. This story takes place in Germany.
About time. Did you have to brew it first, or what's it taking so long?
My friend's patience is starting to wear thin, but he still stays friendly. You saw me walk to the bar and make your drinks right away, then return right away. Those beers take a bit to pour correctly. I'm sorry, but there is no way I could have brought those to you any faster.
We are customers, and this is how you talk to us? Ever heard of the customer is always right? How can you be so rude to paying customers?
Now my friend really had enough.
I was very respectful towards you, while you were very rude from the moment you came in here.
The moment he said that, she got this weird grin on her face, and you could tell this was exactly what she wanted.
Shut up! How dare you! I will have you know, me and the owner are old friends. I will have your job over this. Now get me your manager.
Friend, please, I need this job.
Too late. You should have thought about this before you treated guests this rude. Now, get me the manager.
Friend went behind the bar and had a short talk to one of the older guys working there. Let's call him OG. Both returned to the table. OG.
What seems to be the problem, ma'am?
Entitled lady, suddenly playing the sweet old lady that is so nice.
When we came in here, your server sat there with someone and played chess. We waited and finally asked nicely if we could have a menu. He rolled his eyes at us and gave us the menu from his table. Then we ordered drinks, and he walked over, made our drinks, and then just stood there for a good 10 minutes before he brought our drinks. When I politely asked him to bring our beer, he was really rude to me. Since I know the owner, we eat here all the time, and usually the service is excellent. I demand you fire him and comp our meals.
OG, turning to my friend.
Is that really what happened?
Friend. Of course not. She came, entitled lady, suddenly, all the mask of friendliness gone, starts screeching.
What are you asking him for? I just told you what happened. Are you calling me a liar? Wait till the owner hears of this.
At this point, my friend and OG could no longer hold it back, and they started laughing.
You think this is funny? Never have I been so insulted.
Friend. Yeah, I know. Wait till the owner hears of this. Oh wait, the owner already did hear of this. I am the owner, and I have never seen you in my life, nor have you ever eaten here. You two are just trying to scam a free meal out of me by being impossibly difficult till the server finally snaps or does something wrong, so you can ask for a manager and lie to him about what happened. Now you pay for your beer and then you go, and do not even think of coming back. You are banned. Wow, I had no idea people could get that red in the face. She put 10 euros on the table. Now get out. And they shuffled out to never return. Boy, that was the most entertaining attempt to scam him I have ever witnessed. Next we've got, I do work here, and the show is over. I'm going home. Turned out longer than expected. Happened last night, and I'm still chuckling about it. I'm a sound tech at a pretty busy venue in a southern college town. We have tons of weekly events, bands, karaoke, trivia, fundraisers, etc., and a bar that's open from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. most days. I work with about 3 other sound techs, but I'm the primary tech because I have the most experience, / was dumb enough to get a college degree in audio engineering, thinking it would profit me something other than the gratification of polishing audio turds from entitled musicians and patrons. But I do love my job and most of the people I work with. Being close to a fairly well-known college, if I told you which one, you'd get why this happened. We get a lot of kids playing with mommy and daddy's money who come in, act super entitled, and usually get promptly put in their place. This will be a description of one such occasion. Anyway, we had just had these 2 bands play, and I was none too happy with them since they arrived an hour late and gave me the completely wrong input list, prompting me to do a ton of extra work routing almost 3 additional and weird instruments into the mixing desk. They had finally finished around midnight, and I was making an attempt at coiling cables around a mountain of band gear. I was almost done when a gaggle of college-aged girls led by a taller blonde, whom I will refer to as Kit, Karen in training, stumble in, being very loud. I hear them start making demands of the bartender, who also just wants to go home, and he's sorting out their drink order, explaining he can only serve them 1 drink each and they need IDs for everyone, blah blah blah. I continue my work, putting microphones away, and now am packing up the mic stands, some of which are mine, when Kit walks right up on the stage and approaches me directly. Kit.
Hey, so when's the band gonna start? What do you guys play?
Actually, you guys just missed them. I'm just the sound tech, and I'm packing up for the night.
What? But why? It's only 12, and we just got here.
Well, they have already packed up. I'm just waiting for them to move some stuff off stage, and I'll be out of here as well. We have another show tomorrow. Come back, and She interrupts me, grabbing my arm.
Well, can you do me a huge favor and set up karaoke for me and my friends? I saw in the events that you guys do karaoke.
No, sorry. I can't do that. Karaoke is on Thursday if you want to come back then.
I can't believe you're telling me no. We are patrons and brought 10 people.
Fun fact, their group had 6.
To your bar, and you're saying you can't accommodate us?
Well, sorry, I'm a contractor actually, and I haven't been approved to do any additional work. I'm pretty expensive hourly, and I'm pretty sure my boss isn't gonna want to pay me to stick around and set the sound system back up just for you and your friends. Seriously, just come back Thursday. It's a lot of fun.
This is ridiculous. Where's your boss? I'll talk to him.
He's not here tonight. Feel free to email him though. I give her a business card, hoping it would end the interaction.
If he's not here, can't you just do it? How would he know?
Cameras. Dude, it's not worth my job. I told you, I'm not doing it. I apologize for the inconvenience, but even if I wanted to, I would get in big trouble without approval. I have to finish working and get off the clock now. Bye. At this point, I turn away to finally finish packing away the mics and stands, and she just kind of stands there dumbfounded. I ignore her and go about my business. I walk back behind the sound booth to cover up the board for the night when I notice Kit and one of her friends picking up one of the band guitars and the other mock playing the keyboard, literally banging on it. At this point, I'm mad. Being a musician, nothing makes me angrier than entitled and inexperienced strangers touching my gear, and I'm sure the band I mixed for would feel the same way if they weren't out back. I march back to the stage. Okay, you and your friends need to pay your tab and get the heck out. Now.
Why? This isn't even yours. Why do you care?
I'm going to ask you one more time. Pay your tab and get out, or I'm going to call the police. At this point, her friend is looking pretty embarrassed and saying something about how they should just leave.
Whatever. You're a jerk. We are never coming back here ever again.
Fine by me. Pay, then leave. Now. I grab the guitar away from her, and she and her friends pay their tab and leave. Kind of a non-dramatic ending, but I did hear them complaining about me loudly to the bartender. After they left, he slipped me a free shot for making them leave so he didn't have to. I clocked out, drank it, and laughed, knowing I'd have a pretty good story for this sub. Next we've got stormed out after quitting a job I never had. This happened to me yesterday, and I can't not share it because it's absolutely hilarious to me. I was recently hired in a smallish motorcycle garage/workshop just under 3 weeks ago as a mechanic, yet what I tend to do most of the time is errands for the other people that work there, as I'm new and I'm not going to complain. Normally it's organizing bolts, tidying tools up, sweeping, or grabbing food on the lunch break for everyone. They chip in cash-wise for it, obviously. Just before lunch, myself and one of my colleagues managed to bend a breaker bar, a large bar designed to increase torque on a nut or bolt to make stiff bolts easier to loosen, and therefore need to replace it. I take the company card, as it's a company expense, take everyone's money, and head into the town to do some light shopping. Thankfully, we're situated about a 5-minute walk from a Halford's, British store for bicycles, car parts, tools, etc., and there's a small coffee shop opposite. The work uniform we have is essentially just black overalls, and I personally put a hoodie over the top half as it can get quite cold around this time of year. This makes me look very similar to the uniform that is worn in the Halford shop. I turn up and head to the tools section and find a breaker bar easily enough. They're quite large, so it's hard to miss them. While I'm there, I have a general browse at a few other things in the shop, and an employee asks if I need a hand. I'm juiced up on coffee, and am reading the back of an alarmed padlock box when they speak, and it makes me jump, smacking my head on the shelf above and knocking some things off the shelf. Nothing heavy or delicate, thankfully, just a few pairs of heated gloves and some tubs of glue. Apologizing and able to laugh about it, I assist the worker in placing everything back onto the shelf when a buzzer goes off, and he says he has to head to the office and thanked me for helping restack the shelf. Just as I finish restacking the shelf and picking up the item I was looking at, a man walks in with a toolbox that the place sells and comes up to me, kicking and screaming that he lost a part of it or something. I honestly wasn't paying attention to what he was saying. I attempted to explain that I don't work here. He simply pointed at my legs, presuming they are trousers, not overalls, and calls me a liar, and says that if I don't replace what he lost, he would fire me on the spot. The worker, who had headed to the office, arrived back at the end of the aisle about this time and asked if there was anything he could help with, and I, having spotted his name tag before, told him by name that I've got this. Turning back to the clearly irritated gentleman, I tell him that he can't fire me because I quit. I placed the items I was holding on top of the toolbox straddled across his arms and stormed off, being careful not to turn and show the massive grin on my face. Out the doors I went and off to the coffee shop before returning to work, having completely forgotten to return and buy the breaker bar. Told them the story, and another colleague walked over and bought it himself with a card. Really lightened the mood of a cold, dirty workshop for the day. You're going to have a kid. You don't need video games. For a little bit of backstory, this happened just today, and the circumstances of its occurrence should have screamed that something was going to happen. My wife and I are students at the university in the town in which we live, and we have a house from which we commute to school every day. Today, however, her car happened to be in the shop for routine maintenance, and my older sister was borrowing my truck to pick up her kids from their dad. Lastly, my wife is currently in the last stages of pregnancy, by which I mean no fun time, because I'm afraid something might grab onto me, which meant that walking or biking like we sometimes do on nice days was out of the question. That left us with our final option, the bus. Luck was on our side in the fact that there was a bus stop only a couple blocks away from our house, so we didn't have to walk too far. The bus came within a few minutes of us waiting, so before long we found ourselves seated and moving. Typically, when we head off to our classes, she brings her 3DS with her to play while she waits for her next class. It's an original model 3DS that I got her for our second Christmas together, and she's always taken very good care of it. Today, she had brought Ocarina of Time to play, and she was fighting one of the bosses as young Link. And that is when the villain of our story enters the scene. The bus driver brought the bus to a stop, and the doors swung open to give entry to a woman probably in her mid to late 30s, and her kid, a boy probably 7 or 8, maybe 9 at the most. The bus isn't crowded, but nonetheless, as we're closer to the front, the mom decides they're going to sit down with us. The kid sits between my wife and his mom, and occasionally we catch him staring at the game my wife is playing. After a little while, she smiles and positions herself so that he can watch a bit better, and then a little later hands it over and lets him start playing. For his credit, the kid was actually really nice, very polite, and not at all entitled, which made me feel even sorrier for him when all was said and done. Our stop finally arrived, and as he saw me stand and help my wife up, the kid closed the DS and made sure to hand it back to us. My wife thanked him and reached out to take it, but then his mom snatched it right out of her kid's hands. The ensuing conversation went somewhat closely to what follows. Wife: "Oh, excuse me, but that's mine." Entitled Mom:
But he was having so much fun. Can't he just play it a little longer?
I'm sorry, but this is our stop, and I really need it back. I don't want to hold up the bus any more than we have to.
Aren't you a bit old for video games? I think giving them up could do you some good.
As she said that, she patted her own stomach. Did she really think my wife is just fat? My wife looked at me and raised her eyebrows like, is this lady serious? Then said, "I'm pregnant, ma'am," in what was probably the least enthusiastic tone of voice I've heard her say it in.
See? You won't be needing it anyway, so he can have it, right?
Me: "Not unless you want to go out and buy one for him. That one is very special to us, and we'd like it back." Kid:
Mom, just give it back.
Entitled Mom, rounding on her kid.
Be quiet! I've got this.
Turns back to us.
You're going to have a baby. You won't have time for video games, so you surely won't miss this.
The exchange went back and forth for a bit before the bus driver got out of his seat and came over. Unlike many moms in her position, this particular entitled mom relented when faced with someone with some amount of authority and reluctantly relinquished the 3DS. The kid looked clearly ashamed of his mom. We got off, said goodbye to the kid, and thanked the bus driver for coming to our rescue. In between classes, she beat the inside of King Jabu Jabu's belly. Sorry if that was a bit anticlimactic, but it's hard to tell who an entitled mom will listen to. I'm half disappointed myself, but oh well. Maybe now that I've typed it all out, I can sleep. Next we've got, I made my high school chemistry teacher lose his job. I went to a bad high school in a poor community, but my parents raised me to work my butt off so I could get out of there. My parents never went to college, but because of this, myself and my siblings have all gone to good schools out of state. I maintained a 4.0 until the year in question in high school, taking 5 advanced courses a year, out of 6 total, with the last 6 not offering an honors alternative. I learned to get very little sleep because of the amount of work these courses required, and because my school didn't have tutoring aids or anything of the like. Didn't understand something? Tough crap. Get to Googling. So in one of my upperclassmen years, I signed up for an advanced chemistry course. I knew it would be hard, but assumed like the rest of my courses that if the class was minimally structured and Google came through per usual, I would be fine. Other students warned me not to take the course, but since I wanted to go to college for chemistry, I knew I had to go through with it. The teacher was horrible. He was old, which is fine, and didn't offer after-class support, which was normal, but also didn't even offer in-class support. His answer to even basic questions was,
You should understand that. Talk to me about it later.
but later never came. He didn't offer lunch hours, didn't offer after-school hours, and in class would just put up the answers, which were already available online and in the back of the book. My family didn't have fancy tutor money, and none were readily available in my community anyways. I studied my butt off, but when the first test came back, I had a D-, with no notes to even understand what I had done wrong. When I went to speak with him about it right after class ended, missing part of my next course in the process, he simply told me to look more closely at the textbook for help and that he didn't have time for me. He was 2 weeks behind the explanations that he did give because he was constantly distracted. All of this is bad, but didn't deserve him being fired yet. What did was when he got dangerous. In an experiment working with hydrochloric acid, a plug held the concentrated stuff in a tube with some magnesium and reacted to form hydrogen bubbles. Well, one of the other students in my group didn't plug the thing properly, and the plug fell out, with the magnesium being stuck in the tube now without the HCl. So I asked him how to get the tube back, expecting him to tell us to discard the HCl solution, rinse with water, and start over. I'd read the safety section in my textbook, which had this approach to working with acids. His response? He insisted that I stick my ungloved hand in the solution and just grab the plug, and then still in the solution, plug it back in. He wouldn't even put his own hand in to do it. So my high school self thought this was an inherently bad idea. I took some more magnesium from the workbench and kept adding it to the solution until it stopped reacting, eating up all of the HCl to just leave water. And it kept getting worse. One day, he brought what he claimed were illegal fireworks into the classroom and started setting them off. He thought it was funny to point them at us, wearing no safety equipment or goggles, and hoodies that could have easily caught the fiery things. He frequently would leave the room while a group of high school kids were playing with Bunsen burners and caustic chemicals. So, in combination with the total lack of education I was getting, I didn't feel safe. I'm a girl, by the way. All of the boys got A's on tests, with no explanations. He even lost one of the other boys' tests and straight up said in front of me and the rest of the class that we would just give him an A-, assuming that he had done well. Later on, I had asked the other student for help understanding something, and even he didn't know what was going on in the course, so I knew it was just BS. Every other girl I asked was getting the same inexplicable grades as I was. This wasn't unusual on its own either, as I had several teachers like this. Just usually they had at least still grade fairly. Last contextual thing. My high school teachers union had negotiated for tenure. After coming to college, I've learned that this is a very unusual thing, and in retrospect, it's an idiotic thing. This chemistry teacher was tenured, which meant that there was basically no way to fire him. Honestly, I felt bad for the bitter old man, because after a botched surgery, he was constantly in pain. He was still teaching because he refused to retire, and he had a son going through college that he needed to pay for. But at a certain point, this was affecting my chances of getting into college. I wasn't about to let one man's issues affect prospects for the rest of my life. So I looked up recording laws for my state and found that it was a one-party consent state, meaning that I could legally record my teacher through audio as long as the campus didn't say anything against it. They had no policies, and I was one of the parties consenting. So for a month, with my grade tanking, despite hours of studying and 3 study books on the course, I recorded him. I recorded his fireworks, his yelling at students, his crying in the back chemical storage room, leaving us unsupervised. I recorded the 3 times he had left campus, leaving the front office to send a last-minute substitute to open the door and let us in. You know, the 15 minutes and I'm legally allowed to leave meme? That was a constant joke for my class. And then I made a throwaway Gmail to make a throwaway Dropbox account, big at the time. I uploaded everything and emailed it to my superintendent with the ultimatum that if something wasn't done, I would email the recordings to the local news, and that I really didn't want to do that. Within a day, I heard back, with her assuring me that I wouldn't be punished for ratting him out. My parents, her, and myself met. We went over my grades, my unmarked tests and homework, and the videos. They asked me first to talk over my concerns with the teacher, and I said I was uncomfortable with that, given his treatment of students. The superintendent said she wouldn't tell the teacher who had submitted the evidence, but that they needed to speak with him about the concerns to hear his side of the story. My parents and I said that was completely reasonable as long as my name was never mentioned. The next day, the teacher said he needed to speak with me after class alone. I told him I couldn't, as I had another course after that, and he said that it was important. I turned on my phone's recorder again right before the class ended, and as I was packing up, he approached me. Due to the shape of the classroom, I was literally backed into a corner and would have had to push him to the side to get out. He then started saying that one of the students in the course had brought unfounded concerns and lies to the administration about what was going on in the course, and that he knew we hadn't always gotten along well, but that he hoped I wouldn't have done that to him. I lied through my teeth and said that I didn't know what he was talking about, that he was making me uncomfortable by blocking my access to the door, and that I was late for my next class. He didn't even deny what I was saying, just said that since I clearly had a problem with him, he'd be willing to stay after class to help me specifically since it seemed like I was struggling so much. After that, I told him I really needed to get to my next course, and he finally moved. I emailed the superintendent that recording during my next course and CC'd my parents. My parents were furious. The superintendent was mad too, because while my parents were poor, they dressed up nicely. My mom was an expert in bluffing about getting a lawyer that we totally couldn't afford, so a liability lawsuit was probably ringing through the lady's mind. Since the district couldn't fire him, he was put on immediate, permanent medical leave. While the district was still paying his full pay, they gave us one unqualified substitute after another. 2 months before the national exam for the course, they gave us a teacher that they had pulled out of retirement, but that had actually taught the advanced chemistry course for years. She was a godsend, and even held 8-hour Saturday classes so that we could catch up with the curriculum at least enough to pass the class. In those 2 months, we covered just enough of the test's material that our class had a 50% pass rate. According to my upperclassmen friends, this was a lot higher than it had been for their years, with less than 10% of the class passing. The superintendent also wrote me a thank you college recommendation letter, partially to keep me quiet, and partially because they had been trying to get rid of this guy for years. My little sister took this course a couple of years after me and said that the new teacher was competent and they were still at that 50% pass rate. Next we've got, I don't work here, Karen. I live here. A few years ago, I was a sweet summer child freshly out of college with zero idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was a homeowner after maternal unit moved overseas and gave the house to me, and I decided to work for a house painting company for one summer while I got my metaphorical ducks in a row. The next summer, I was out of the painting business and working as an EMT, which meant sometimes I would have a full day or two off, 24 on, 48 off. I noticed my house was in some need of paint touch-ups, so I decided to do them myself. I had brushes, paint, nothing to do, and some beer, so I went at it one Tuesday afternoon. So I'm working on the frame of the front door, dressed in old painter whites and a t-shirt with the sleeves cut off, and I sit down to let the primer dry and have a beer. I'm happily perched on the front step when I notice a "Can I speak to your manager?" haircut with a face that looks like she just ate 12 lemons staring at me from the sidewalk. My front lawn is decently long and slopes down a hill, but I could see an artery pulsing in her neck from my spot. She had a dog next to her, so I just wave and say, "Cute dog." I guess my words broke the floodgates, and she unleashed upon me a verbal assault of which I understood about 30%.
How dare you drink on the job on this nice property? You don't deserve to sit there and waste the hard-earned money of the well-educated person that owns this place.
While I'm pondering this, she's still spewing, frothing condensation at me, which culminated in,
Uneducated, lazy, menial, freeloading jerks like you. What is wrong with this country?
she's positively quivering with anger and indignation. Her dog is pulling at the leash to say hi to me, and so I bend down to say hello back. When she says,
Well, what do you have to say for yourself?
I raise myself to my full 6'2" height, which towers over her little 5'0" self. She doesn't back down, and the following conversation ensues. Me. Hello, ma'am. What seems to be the problem?
You? Sitting there wasting the homeowner's money so you can get paid to be a lazy drunk.
Me. Oh, I'm being paid? Seems odd. I don't feel the need to pay myself for this, but I suppose that could be fun to try. Her, gears turning.
Pay yourself? Don't make me laugh. Some deadbeat like you couldn't afford this house. You need an education for a real job.
I'm wondering what her education fixation is all about, but not caring all that much. I just want to entertain her conversation enough to really get her mad. Maybe her head will explode. Me. Well, I didn't buy this house. My mother did. But she left it to me when she moved overseas after I graduated from college. Her, smirking.
Oh, did you go to local community college? Known for not being that great? Only someone working as a painter would go there.
Me. Actually, if you look at my shirt, you'll see it says Ivy League School Athletics, which is where I attended school and played a sport. I am in good shape because of that, so I figured I would keep that up by working on improving my own home while having a few beers to cool off in this heat. Did you attend community college? Because if so, I can see how you might not be able to understand that. Disclaimer, nothing wrong with that community college. It's where I got my EMT license. Just wanted to watch her boil. And oh boy, did she. Her eyes widen bigger than I thought possible, and her mouth starts working like elderly folks do when they've lost a lot of teeth. Lots of lip twisting. This culminates in her reading her ugly head back and spitting on the front of my shirt.
You probably stole that from someone, you ungrateful piece of crap.
Okay, wow. Not sure what I'm ungrateful for. And ew, germs. So I tell her that it's been fun, but I'm going to continue working and turn to walk back up the lawn. She grabs the back of my shirt and attempts to pull me backwards. Doesn't work, so I spin around and smack her hand off me. She flops like a Premier League soccer player, flinging herself all over my lawn. She's let go of the dog's leash, so he comes over to me for pets, happy as a clam. Her yodeling has brought some neighbors out of their homes, including my cool next door ones. They come over and I give them the story and ask for their phone to call the cops. Mine was inside charging. They laugh and hand it over. I let the cops know that some jerk is losing it loudly on my lawn. Could they please come remove her? I return to my work. My cool neighbors probably have started making popcorn. A little while later, I hear the cops arrive. Crazy is still singing her opera and starts screaming at the cops a crazy story. Her talons point to me, so I come down and tell the cops the whole story. They crack up. Apparently, they know the nutcase by name, and so they tell her to call her husband to get the dog again and cuff her for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Dog hung out with me until the husband, apologizing profusely, came and got him. He also informed me that they are in divorce proceedings, so that may have made her crazier than usual. Never saw that lady again, thank God, but have developed a neighborly friendship with her ex and the pup. All's well that ends well. So Karen, what did you think of today's stories?
They were horrible.
Horrible? How dare you? These were some of the best we've ever read.
Oh, shut up, Mr. Reddit. It's ridiculous what people like myself have to go through. Dealing with stupid people like yourself and your subscribers.
Look, Karen, you can say whatever you want about me, but don't you talk about my re-army.
Re-army. Most of your viewers aren't even subscribed to your channel. 70% if I'm correct.
Well, I can't argue with that. That's true. Most of my viewers don't actually subscribe for some reason.
It's because you're stupid, Mr. Reddit.
No, I'm not. All right, guys, let's prove Karen wrong by making sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on notifications.
They're not going to listen to you.
And if you'd like me or Karen to record a special message for you, come visit me on Fiverr, link pinned in the comments below.
Never!
And join as a channel member today, and Karen will give you a special shout out in the next video.
Like heck I will!